and other countries in the region have very strong links with China on the economic and cultural front. So that creates more complexity to the situation. But in terms of this particular issue, the UN could have a role in the sense of bringing this issue to the fore in discussions and debates. And perhaps the Council could have a debate, maybe not necessarily directly on, let's say, the arbitral award, but on rule and order, for example, or rule and order to prevail in the maritime domain in the South China Sea, and to talk about UNCLOS. And I think discussions like that would help create greater awareness of the importance of UNCLOS and also of maintaining a rules-based order so that any disputes or conflicts are settled through the rule of law and through peaceful means, and not through coercive measures or aggressive moves.
Yes, so President Ilves, just take a seat. Just take a seat. I think this is kind of a demand, for actually also our colleagues or our successors at the UN, just to pick it up and maybe, just have an open debate. So I take this as an operational proposal from you to those who listen. Now, it's my great pleasure to have the Prime Minister of Namibia here. Thank you so much for coming. I know that we have a bit of a competition here at the Munich Security Conference. That is that in parallel, the summit of the African Union is meeting in Addis, and we are very happy that instead of going to Addis, you have come to Munich. So thank you very much for this. Now, at COP27, the EU and Namibia concluded a strategic partnership on sustainable raw materials and renewable hydrogen. Germany has signed this partnership with Namibia. Now, on climate change, on working to remedy situation, and we heard what the Vice President of Colombia also said on climate change. This relationship that we're developing as EU and as Germany with Namibia, is this something that you say this is kind of exemplary for also other countries because it ensures mutual benefits, local value addition, aligned climate and development goals? So do you see that this is something that you could recommend also to other countries to conclude?
Yes, thank you very much. It is an agreement that is very important, I must say, for Namibia. As I can see, it is for Germany and for Europe generally. One, for Namibia, because we are one of the countries that are most affected by climate change, and we experience all sorts of climate-related disasters. As I'm speaking, there are parts of my country that are flooded, and there are parts of the country that have suffered from drought. So we are providing relief to communities that have suffered from drought and others that have suffered from flooding. So for us, really generating energy through climate-friendly means is very important for us. And green hydrogen, therefore, is a very strategic project for us. It is our wish, and we are happy that Germany and our other partners in this project are embracing of this idea, that this project turns out to be mutually beneficial to both countries, because what we have observed is that the southern countries that are endowed with resources are often benefiting only marginally or not at all from the resources that they are endowed with. And in order for us to ensure sustainable cooperation between our countries that would promote mutual benefits, we have to ensure that these projects are implemented in a manner that benefit both countries. Of course, Germany has technology, Germany has skills, and we would like that this project would not only provide energy to Europe. It would provide energy also to Namibia, also to SADC. It would address the issue of security of supply of energy and also the cost of energy, and that it would support the development of the entire value chain so that there is also an improvement on the economy of the situation, improvement in terms of forex earnings, public revenue, job creation, and reduction of inequities and industrialization. So we are hopeful that these goals are going to be realized, and to the extent that that is so, obviously we would like that to be a model of cooperation between the North and the South.
No, thank you for this. We have at the conference, I don't think he is here right now, the German Minister for Economy and the Environment, Mr. Habeck. He was in your country and also accompanied by industry, by business, because this is a cooperation which you need. You need government initiatives and government driven, but you need business to do it. So I really hope that the model that you just said, and you confirmed what I said earlier, we really hope that this works fast, and we'll have a look at this, and maybe in a year, a couple of years, when you're here again, we see how it worked out, and if this, because we need to make progress. Now, you will probably ask why there are 2 Latin Americans and 1 African and one Asian here. This has to do with Mauro. Mauro, the foreign minister of Brazil, is a very good friend, and we were for 3 years together in New York as UN ambassadors. And so when also your wonderful ambassador incited me to say, well, Mauro has to be on this forum, and I said, okay, I'll ask our 2 other from the other country for their understanding that Mauro is also here. And I would like to continue with the theme. When you're president, and President Lula in his first speech to the nation said, I quote, Brazil would resume its leading role in the fight against the climate crisis. I think the whole world was relieved and was very happy about what your president said. Maybe, Mauro, you can tell us a bit what priorities does the government set in achieving this ambition, and how can global climate action be advanced with Brazilian leadership? Mauro, again, thanks so much for coming.
Well, thank you so much, Christoph, for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be here and to see so many friendly faces from the New York Times, and I really enjoyed very much working with you during the 3 years we had together there. Well, with reference to the environment policy that was presented by President Lula, as a matter of fact, he launched his platform of climate change and the fight against climate change and environment at the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. He went there as a guest. He was president-elect, but he delivered a very powerful speech where he set the basis for his whole policy concerning environment and climate change and so on. And he stated it clearly, and he repeated it in his inauguration speech, that climate change and environment will be a main concern and a pillar of foreign and domestic policy. Well, finance projects of sustainability and development in the region, in Brazil and the neighboring countries. And other countries followed. It's like Norway and France, the United States, they have also declared that they would take part in the Amazon Fund. It's very important to have a funding for projects of sustainability in the area. And well, besides that, President Lula wants to host COP30 in 2025 in Brazil, in the Amazon. It will take place at the state of Pará in the north of Brazil, in the heart of the Amazon. He wants to showcase the Amazon and what we'll be doing from here till 2025. And besides that, we will also, in order to make it public that we want to have environment and protection of the forest in the center of our policies, we will summon a summit of presidents of the Amazon region. The treaty, we have an organization, OTCA, Organization of the Treaty of Cooperation in the Amazon, and he's in the month of August, he wants to host this summit in Brazil and to take the results of this summit and present them at UN at the opening of the General Assembly.
Oh, thank you very much. I think the whole world is watching because Brazil plays such an important role in this, and we wish you good luck. And I think it's very important with regard to the fund in general that the international community stands together in supporting the project. Now, I turn to the audience. This is now an opportunity to ask questions, to make comments. And when you do that, please identify yourself. If I don't can just ask while people are thinking, Mauro, one question to you still. When we were working together in New York, we of course discussed a lot about football. But at the same time, we sat together in our group of G4 with our friends from India and Japan, and we were trying to push reform of the Security Council. Now, I don't know how your assessment was after we had about, 50, 60 meetings when you and I left, what your assessment was about the progress we had achieved during this time. But in general, when you now look back to your time there and as foreign minister, you have, of course, opportunities to impact the UN reform. How optimistic are you that we'll succeed in preserving the UN Charter as a guardian of the international cooperation and life together on this planet, and is there a chance to strengthen this by changing the charter with regard to the composition of the Security Council? Is there any hope, or but please a short answer, because on this topic one can talk for an hour.
Yes, no doubt, or maybe much longer, as we did in New York during 3.5 years. And Christian Benavides is here, he's a witness of the effort we had. No, we continue to work very intensely with the reform of Security Council, but not only the Security Council. The UN needs to review the methods of work of the General Assembly, the Security Council, the composition, and so on. And we need to have more representation. It has to be more legitimate, with more representation. There are at least 2 continents that are totally absent in the Security Council. And but it's not, as I said, the only one. I think that we have to think in terms of global institutions that can help us keep peace and govern the world. Global governance. WTO is another example. World Trade Organization is totally paralyzed, and it's a very important tool to promote trade development and also sustainability and peace. The Security Council, of course, it's the best example. It's visible. We have to do something in the coming years, because otherwise we'll see UN being paralyzed, as well as other institutions. And I believe it's very paralyzed these days.
Yeah, thank you for this. So we take Natalie Tocci first, and then Javier Solana.
Thank you very much. Now, over the course of the last few days and the next, inevitably much of the discussion has revolved around Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I think it'd be extremely important for the Europeans and North Americans in this room to hear your take, not so much on the war, but how the war endangers the international order, and in particular the priorities that you've been discussing on this panel. That affect your countries, from climate and the transition to maritime security, etc.
You direct this to Mauro. Yes, the question is. Yeah.
Whoever wants to pick this up.
So you have to pick one, because if all four speak, nobody else will have a chance to. So.
Mauro. Yeah.
Mauro. Okay.
Well, okay.
Sorry to put you on the spot there.
No. Well, thank you for your question. Of course, the war in Ukraine is a very sad situation. We are going through it with impacts all over the world. Even for us, we are so far away from the theater of a war. But of course, the increase in prices of energy, inflation, foodstuff, everything, and disruption of maritime traffic, it's a question of great concern. We have deplored strongly the invasion, and we have condemned the aggression. We couldn't have done it otherwise, because we have as main goals of or main instruments of foreign policy, we have a set of principles like international law, non-intervention in foreign countries, human rights, rule of law. So we could not have done otherwise. But that said, I think it's more than time. It's 1 year now. We have to try to build the possibility of a solution. We cannot keep on talking only of war. We have to try to discuss some kind of solution, some space to be. I do not mean immediate negotiation, a peace that would be perfect and the ideal, but I think we have to go step by step and trying to find an atmosphere that would lead us to some kind of understanding and negotiation. Otherwise, we'll be stuck in this position.
One could continue on this issue, but it is indeed one of the overarching issues here. But I want to go to Javier Solana. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It has been a very interesting exchange of views among yourselves. I wonder if, in particular, Mauro can answer a question about the role that your country wants to have on the geographical organization. BRICS, for instance, how do you feel the energy of President Lula? Do you think that has to be mobilized at this point in time, in which we need the regional organization to be more active? And the second question, how do you see Mercosur moving? You know, for many in this audience, Europeans, the relation between Mercosur and Europe is fundamental. And for that, it's fundamental that Mercosur begins to be a really important alliance. And the same to our lady from Africa. African Union has started a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, with a new energy is that energy going to be continued? I know you have problems in the organization, but I think in this debate about the United Nations, the role of this regional organization is going to be fundamental. So you can say something about that, I would be appreciated. Thank you.
To allow Mauro, who has been on the spot all the time, to breathe a bit, would you want to start on the role of the African Union? Prime Minister?
Oh, is it myself? Okay.
Yes, it's yourself.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yes, the African Union is quite optimistic or probably committed to drive the AU agenda that we call Agenda 2063, that aims to ensure that there is human-centered development in Africa. And that goes back to the point that I made earlier in regard to the green hydrogen project. The idea is to ensure that we do not only optimize economic growth in Africa, but that growth is going to translate into improved conditions of the people of Africa, that we would like to build the resilience of the African economies, and we want to achieve industrialization of Africa, and most importantly, to safeguard the peace and security in Africa. So that commitment remains, and that is why there is an AU summit that is taking place now. Our president is attending together with the Minister of International Relations, who is the Deputy Prime Minister. It was Division of Labor that I'm here. Of course, we recognize that we would need to pursue a partnership with Europe, for example, amongst others, America and others that we trade with, and also that we work with on other matters around the world in order for that vision to be realized, because these regions are our trade partners, and much of the goods that we produce now end up in those markets. It is our hope that our partnership would progress along the lines of optimizing benefits for both parties, as I have indicated in the case of green hydrogen. But it's also important that we invest more resources as a global community and efforts to safeguard peace and security. And that would include that where there are conflicts, we find peaceful means of resolving those conflicts. Because obviously it is distressing when there are conflicts because they cause human suffering. For those of us who come from countries like Namibia that were assisted by the Soviet Union, it's very sad to see Ukraine and Russia fighting, because these two states were Soviet Union that supported us to gain our independence. So we are not promoting one against the other. We are not indifferent to the suffering of one or another. That is why we are promoting a peaceful resolution of that conflict, so that the entire world and all the resources of the world can be focused on improving the conditions of people around the world, instead of being spent on acquiring weapons, killing people, and actually creating hostilities that would take forever to overcome. So our position is that for as long as one person in this world feels insecure, for as long as one person feels shortchanged, that person will be angry, and that thing is going to destroy the peace and security of everyone. So all of us are better off. That is what we were advised when we were fighting for our independence to do. That is what we eventually did. Our war for national liberation, which was very bloody and protracted, ended with a negotiated settlement. And today Namibia is hailed as one of the most peaceful, most stable countries in Africa. Those who may not be aware of the history that we went through would not know what we went through. We went through genocide. We went through a system where Africans were trophy hunted. We went through a situation where 80% of a whole tribe was wiped out. But we decided to put that behind us and look forward to the future. And that is now why we are hopeful today that we can prosper together with countries that we considered to be enemies, but are today partners with whom we are working towards a prosperous future for all our countries.
But allow me to ask you, Prime Minister, you just mentioned exactly what we are witnessing, that instead of focusing on the real problems, we have now, this conflict where so many lives are lost and so much money is spent instead of looking at these problems. And the General Assembly very clearly 141 condemned and made very clear who is the aggressor. And taking this, why did Namibia abstain?
Yeah, you see, as I have indicated, our focus is on resolving the problem. It is not on shifting blame. And that is what we did in Namibia itself. We decided to adopt the policy of national reconciliation. Every country deals with issues differently. In South Africa, our neighbor, they had the Commission for Truth and Reconciliation, where those that are suspected of having committed transgressions during the apartheid period were called to give witness. And those who did not do that ended up going to jail. In Namibia, we decided to not do that. It doesn't mean that we were not hurt because of what happened to us. We thought that would work better for us, and it has worked better for us. We are saying that in this situation where Namibia itself has suffered, because we suffered disruption of supply chains, increase in prices, recession of the economy, erosion of the gains, the social gains that we had realized, and now really challenges in terms of meeting our development goals. And that is now besides the human sufferings that we are not indifferent to. We are saying, however, it doesn't really help us to spend money, be it Russia spending money on the weapons or the Western countries arming Ukraine. The bottom line is that this money by Russia and the West that is used to buy weapons to enable Russia and Ukraine to kill one another could be better utilized to promote development in Ukraine, in Africa, in Asia, and other places, in Europe itself, where many people are experiencing hardships. That is really what we are saying. Let's engage one another and find a solution that is hopefully permanent, so that we would never ever see the like of the situation like what is now happening in Ukraine, which is unfortunately also happening in other parts of the world, including Palestine, Iraq, Yemen, and all these other trouble spots. I think we will do better to try and resolve this conflict peacefully.
Mauro, I come to you later because this was an important question. We are losing time, and I'm about to lose some friends if I don't call on them. Minister Eide, yes.
Thank you, Christoph, and congratulations on an excellent panel. I think it's imperative that we listen to the voices of the South in this meeting, so congrats on that. And my question is to Vice President Marquis and Foreign Minister Vero. Norway, where I come from, have a very solid cooperation with both of you on preserving the Amazon, which, by the way, is not only a regional issue, but it's a global issue. We can simply forget about everything we do in climate change policies if we lose the rainforest, so that's essential. Could you reflect a little bit on your own cooperation with the neighboring countries, the 8 countries of the Amazon, and also this idea that President Lula has been mentioning about sort of a South-South cooperation across the rainforest belt with the Congo Basin, Indonesia, and yourself, how that's going, and how the geopolitics of nature preservation is now coming up on the agenda with these very positive developments in Latin America.
Can I put this just to the Vice President of Colombia?
Yes.
Pero no hay una pregunta concreta, hay un comentario.
The exact question. Well, I believe that we want to have a fund in order to protect the Amazon, because it's the place where the balance can be kept to fight climate change. I come from a different region of Colombia, from the coast, and the sea is also key in order to keep the balance to fight climate change. We are here in order to speak about security, and we when we speak about security, we need to ask ourselves, what are the reasons that make us feel insecure? There's a big part of the world feeling insecure, and we need to reflect about this more deeply. I agree about what the Prime Minister said, that we cannot solve insecurity with weapons. We need to find different ways. These old rules of militarization of life, which we have been witnessing until now, doesn't fit anymore the needs we have today. It's anachronistic. And climate change is one of the biggest issues. We had to bury a lot of people this year in my country who died due to floodings and to droughts caused by climate change in our country. So we have huge challenges. Also hunger. In my country, there are still children dying of hunger every day. Starvation is still a problem. And this has to do with development model, which is not addressing human needs currently. We also have a migration crisis. In Colombia, we are welcoming a lot of refugees from other countries, but also people from our country are going abroad in order to find better life conditions. And the same goes for people fleeing from Africa or from elsewhere to Europe, and they don't find good conditions here. They don't have a dignity in their life here. So that's why I think the new world order has to place humanity at its center and not militarization. So it's not about taking a position about this war, be it Russia, be it Ukraine. We are against war because war has always destroyed humanity. We have had that violence in our country. We had to bury social leaders every day. We have seen how children were recruited by armed groups. And what use would be contributing to keeping up another war? I believe nowadays bilateral relations and diplomacy is not able to address the real challenges humanity is facing. I think we need to go beyond and reflect about the real challenges we have as a society. We are pursuing what we call total peace. We want to achieve real peace in Colombia, which will contribute to a bigger stability in Latin America. And it will contribute to a better protection of the Amazon, which will in turn contribute to stability in the whole world. Also food sovereignty, which is usually not discussed in these conferences, is very important. We need to contribute to the development of food sovereignty, and it needs to be sustainable, it needs to be ecologic. I am a woman. I am the first person of African descent getting to the vice presidency of my country. And we need that women get more power also in bilateral relations, because until now it was usually men in power who always kept wars going on. And it's not about a fight between men and women here, but I do believe that women need to play a more central role, because whenever there is a war or any violent situation, women are affected the most. And in the end, after the war, we are the ones having to pick up the ashes and start reconstruction. Who reconstructed Germany after the war? It was the women. Who was it in Africa after each war? The same in Latin America. Society tend to accept the need of doing away with this patriarchy, with these rules, so that we achieve a new world order which does away with patriarchy, with racism, and with this colonialism we still witness. I believe the current situation forces us to reflect about this. It's not just about receiving a bit of money from the North. In the end, climate change will affect us all. And we need to tackle the challenges we have as humankind. And it's not about to decide what side I'm on when we talk about a war. We need to put all our efforts in order to create a different world with more respect for each other, with more respect for diversity, a world in which we all conceive us all as one society, with transparency, with a lot of honesty, and we need to advance more with regards to protection of life. And since we are discussing security here, this is what I want to put on the table. We usually think of security from a very manly point of view, and we need to protect.
Thank you, Vice President, for this statement. You run, as we say in German, into open doors here. We at the Munich Security Conference are committed on the podiums to have 50% women. And now as a male, I have to see that I leave this room because I give the floor now to a podium of 2 women. But before this, thank you for being here. Thank you for your strong statement. But allow me this one remark on what you said. My country, Germany, was responsible for the Second World War. In our name, 20 million people were killed on the territory of the former Soviet Union. Germany tried with reconciliation, West and East, to actually achieve what you want to, peace for humanity, peace in Europe. We have actually scaled down our military forces. We have scaled down our budget for military, very low. And we really try to say, well, we are surrounded only by peaceful neighbors. Why do we need an army, basically? But then you are confronted with a person, with a country that decides that it's not happy to live on the basis of common rules, that decides just to run over another country, to deny the right of existence of another country. And in this case, I'm very sorry to say this, Vice President, from a German perspective, who have learned the lessons of history, we cannot sit on the fence, because what we want to is preserve humanity, and what is being destroyed by Russia in Ukraine is humanity. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate this. As I said at the outset, for me, this was the most important panel of the Munich Security Conference, because we want to do exactly what you said, Vice President. We want to take these serious, the concerns you are, and we have to stick together. So thank you for coming.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Coming up next, the panel discussion More Than the Sum of Its Parts, the birth of geopolitical Europe, with the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and Sanna Marin, Finland's Prime Minister. You're watching BR24 Live on the Munich Security Conference.
Kindly ask you to remain seated as the program will continue momentarily.
Nos escuchan, buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches, depende de allí donde nos estéis sintonizando. Ya sabéis que estamos ahora mismo en directo aquí en Negocios Televisión, contando un poco todo lo que está ocurriendo en esa Conferencia Nacional de Seguridad de Múnich, y a la espera, porque está a punto de ocurrir, de que comparezcan, de que salgan a ese espacio central de la Conferencia de Seguridad de Múnich, tanto Ursula Von der Leyen, la presidenta de la Comisión Europea, como Sanna Marin, la presidenta de Finlandia. Por cierto, dos personas con mucho que decir en el panorama internacional en la actualidad. Hay que recordar además que ambas vienen casi siempre inmersas en polémica, pero especialmente Ursula Von der Leyen, la presidenta de la Comisión Europea, es quien quizás está más en entredicho después de que el New York Times haya decidido demandar directamente a la propia Von der Leyen y a la Comisión, un New York Times que lleva a los tribunales a Von der Leyen por ocultar los mensajes que se estuvo pasando durante los tiempos de la pandemia con el delegado de Pfizer. Hay que recordar que, desde principios del año pasado ya, el defensor del pueblo alemán, entre otros muchos, le vienen exigiendo una serie de cuestiones de transparencia a Ursula von der Leyen, como son el hecho de que entregue los emails que se intercambiaron durante las compras conjuntas que la propia Comisión y Europa realizaron para todo el tema de los EPIs y especialmente de las vacunas, y que qué ha pasado con eso, cómo se realizaron, y que se dé una serie de información para garantizar la transparencia de la institución. En este sentido, desde el defensor del pueblo alemán no han conseguido poco más que unos pequeños mails, lo mismo que casi todo lo que pues las propias normas de transparencia implicaban, pero el New York Times ha decidido llevar a la presidenta de la Comisión Europea a los tribunales para lograr ese acceso a los mensajes de texto que se cambiaba con el consejero delegado de Pfizer, con Albert Bourla, durante esa negociación para la compra conjunta de vacunas de la COVID-19. Hay que recordar
Morena?
Como desde el intento del periodista alemán y un informe de la defensora del pueblo europeo, lo que está intentando ahora el New York Times es llegar a tener esa información.
¿Qué tal de la Morena? Buenos días.
Que no le habían dado antes.
Buenos días, José. No sé si me escuchas.
Muy buenos días, sí, te escucho.
Que tenemos ya ahí a Von der Leyen. Vamos a seguir todo el día de la mano de la Morena, como están viendo todo lo que se va diciendo. Sanna Marin, que no es poco, y además viene tranquila, no se le ve como en Nochevieja, ¿no? No se le ve nerviosica. Vamos a ver de la Morena si nos da unas titulares interesantes. Van a ser ellas dos, ¿no? En esta mesa las que van a llevar el peso de esta conferencia de seguridad.
Sí, decía yo, intentaba explicar un poquillo todo este caso que persigue a Ursula von der Leyen en estos últimos días con el tema de la denuncia del New York Times para intentar acceder a los SMS con Albert Bourla, con el consejero delegado de Pfizer, por esas compras conjuntas que realizó la Comisión Europea de vacunas y que, de hecho, desde el gabinete de la Comisión Europea, desde el gabinete de la presidenta de Von der Leyen, lo único que han dicho es que como son mensajes efímeros, esa ha sido la respuesta, que como son efímeros no tienen por qué revelar esa información que no pertenece a los estándares de transparencia de Bruselas. Así que el New York Times ha demandado directamente a la Comisión Europea. Así que vamos a ver si en este sentido, no creo que digan mucho porque ya sabes que las preguntas en estas conferencias están siendo muy polite y salvo que alguien quiera específicamente explicar algo,
en las preguntas que ha estado, por ejemplo, Solana preguntando en la anterior mesa, ¿no?
Sí. Pero lo que digo es que preguntan de forma muy abierta, dejando que cualquiera pueda explicar lo que quiere. No van a la actualidad per se, salvo que quien está al otro lado, en este caso Von der Leyen o Sanna Marin, pues quieran hablar de algo concreto. Hay que recordar también que Sanna Marin, aparte de esas fiestas que dices por las que te ha conocido en toda Europa, tiene en el ojo del huracán a Finlandia.
Sí, por eso.
Por la entrada en la OTAN.
En esta mesa sí tiene que subir la tensión, ¿no? Sí que tiene que subir bastante ya el diálogo. Von der Leyen va a tener que dar una respuesta clara a lo que, por ejemplo, dijo Macron ayer aquí, que era que ponía a disposición de toda Europa su arsenal nuclear, que no es poco, y vamos a ver si Von der Leyen recoge ese guante. Y también vamos a ver cómo habla de la guerra de Ucrania en este aniversario, que es la semana que viene, es decir, que la tiene votando para rematar.
Que Von der Leyen tiene que hablar de la guerra, de los SMS no creo, pero de la guerra va a hablar seguro, y Sanna Marin tiene una papeleta parecida porque quiere que Finlandia entre en la OTAN a toda prisa.
Cuanto antes.
Vamos a escucharle. Ya ha empezado, si quieres, y vamos contando un poquito también qué se va a comentar en esa conferencia. Hasta ahora, José.
Shortly thereafter, the world changed. We first had the COVID pandemic. Ursula von der Leyen, and both of you actually, did you ever imagine that you would be involved, and we're just talking about COVID now, in such a global upheaval when you first took the job?
Of course not. I had no clue what was coming up. Indeed, I came into office in December 2019. So I had 90 days, and then the WHO declared the COVID as a global pandemic with all the consequences behind it. I started my mandate with one big priority, and that is the European Green Deal and digitalization. In hindsight, it's still the big topic behind all these crises. But of course, then you have to deal with the pandemic, you have to deal with an atrocious Russian war in Ukraine. So we do not change the direction of travel, but the speed and the challenges, of course, I had no clue what was coming up.
And Prime Minister, you came into office also in December 2019, as the youngest Prime Minister in the world at the time.
Yes, I'm not sure, am I still the youngest Prime Minister? Sebastian Kurz was some part of this term a Prime Minister, and a bit younger than me, and actually I just visited Austria yesterday, and I can remember the good cooperation that we had. I must say that we didn't know what was happening 2020, 2021, 2022, and the world isn't a very pretty place when looking back and looking at the present, and also, unfortunately, looking to the future. The first global pandemic hit, and it changed our security environment in many ways, and we have to make decisions that we thought that we could not do, but we had to do those. Then the war in Europe, energy crisis, and we are still in the midst of war. And in the future, we are still heading towards our biggest challenges, climate change, loss of biodiversity. And as Ursula said, we tackle these problems together. And if you may, Ursula, I want to give a little praise to you. I cannot imagine a better president for the EU Commission during these difficult times. Ursula has been a real power player, and it's been an honor to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask you something? I'm going to jump off from the last intervention in the previous panel, which I suppose one could call Global South. And Ambassador, when he opened this conference, said one of the huge challenges, not just for the conference, but for the world and for policy, is to get a much wider public consensus around the world. You heard the Vice President of Colombia essentially questioning the direction of flow. And I just wonder whether you think that the inability to create equality and equity during the pandemic, that the Global South felt totally cut off, that they didn't get the vaccines in the same way that the rich North did. I wonder if you both look back at that, despite your efforts, and wonder whether that might have contributed, inter alia, to some of the lack of support you have around the world for your Ukraine policy.
I think, should I start, my dear? Yeah. I think it is important that we're very clear about what this Russian war is. It is about Putin's imperialistic plans. And this is something where all of us, and mainly the Global South, have a very clear idea. It is completely unacceptable. And countries on the other side of the Mediterranean have a bitter and long-standing experience. First, you send the negotiators in, then you send, they see that the experts are being sent in, and then it's the mercenaries that are being sent in. So what we have to do is not only explain that we will never ever accept this imperialistic war, we will never ever accept that Putin is trampling on the international law that protects all of us, that the UN Charter, that is also in the interest, I mean, it's in the interest of every single country, is being treated so disrespectful, and that we will never accept that today you can send tanks just across the border to invade a country. And this is something which my experience in the last 12 months needs a lot of just hard work to work together with, as you said, the Global South, to make understood our point of view, but also to work with them on dealing with the knock-on effect of this atrocious war. This is the food crisis. This is the energy crisis. And that we do our utmost to deal with the knock-on effects in a way that the Global South does not suffer too much from Putin's war of aggression. This is our task. It's hard work, but it's absolutely worth it.
Prime Minister Marin, somebody as cult a hero around
primera
the world,
respuesta sobre el tema de la guerra, primera respuesta sobre lo que está ocurriendo en Ucrania, Von der Leyen diciendo que es inaceptable y que no vamos a permitir que a día de hoy, ha dicho, nadie pueda con los tanques cruzar una frontera, atravesar esos bordes e invadir otro país. Eso es lo que está elevando la tensión, no solo en Europa, sino dice también cuando se habla del mercado, del mundo económico, del mercado de comida, de alimentación o de lo que está pasando con los precios de la energía. Bueno, es evidente que esto está ocurriendo. Dice Von der Leyen que no se puede permitir y que no lo van a permitir a día de hoy. Es curioso, como si se pudieran permitir, o como si la gente hubiera querido permitir esas invasiones u otras guerras en otros tiempos. Desde luego eso no está ocurriendo, efectivamente. La Unión Europea no lo está permitiendo, tampoco lo está atacando. De momento se está convirtiendo más en una guerra de desgaste. Vamos con Sana Marin, con la primera ministra de Finlandia.
When Russia attacked Ukraine, it violated all the rules, all the agreements it has itself been committed to before. And this is a problem for everyone, because then we will only see decades of this kind of behavior ahead of us if Ukraine doesn't win the war and if we don't stand behind our values and the international rule-based order. So I think this is a larger issue than just issue for Europe, just issue for Ukraine. And we have to do utmost to make sure that Ukraine will win and that we will preserve this system of rules that we have created together. And there was a reason why this was created. The wars before, world wars that we have seen, and it was devastating. And that's why we built a system where we can negotiate, where we can build peace, not use violence against each other, wars, attack another country to make a stand or gain something.
And to that end, when you came into office, I mean, as early as this time last year, you were saying
Sana Marin, explicando también lo que comentaba de la guerra, explicando que efectivamente no se debe permitir este tipo de cuestiones, pero sobre todo lo da como por desfasado en una opinión bastante más suave, evidentemente, esa vinculación que tiene por toda esta tensión con Rusia, que hay mucha Finlandia, hay que tener en cuenta que está pidiendo la entrada en la OTAN con cierta celeridad, con cierto justo de que todo lo que le ocurra alrededor tenga también mucho que ver con que se puedan ver atacadas infraestructuras energéticas.
Last year, and now we're heading towards very sad anniversary, 1 year anniversary of the war just next week. It was obvious that Finland will join NATO. It was obvious at the same day when Russia attacked Ukraine. The Finnish mindset, the most important thing for Finnish people is to make sure that we are independent, we are secure, we have a sovereign country, we can make our own decisions. This is the number one issue for Finnish people. And when Russia our neighbor attacked another neighbor, Ukraine, it was obvious that Finland will join NATO, because that's the line, that's the only line that Russia wouldn't cross. So it's to do with our security, it's to do with peace. It's an act of peace for Finland to join NATO. We have sent very clear message. We want to join together with Sweden at the same time. It's not only because we are good neighbors and good partners, it's also to do with very concrete matters. The security planning of NATO in the whole north, it's in interest of us, but it's also in the interest of NATO that Finland and Sweden will join simultaneously. And we have sent very clear signal and very clear message to Turkey and also to Hungary that hasn't ratified yet, that we want to enter NATO together, and this is in the interest of everyone.
So no
Bueno, importantísimas estas declaraciones de Sanna Marin, de la primera ministra de Finlandia, porque ya saben que Turquía, de cara a la entrada en la OTAN de Finlandia y de Suecia, tiene siempre cosas que decir, porque tiene ese derecho a veto. En particular, no lo ha hecho con Finlandia, pero sí al respecto de Suecia decían que como se produjeron ciertos temas del Corán y una serie de problemas,
President von der Leyen, you remember very well this time last year,
es muy importante que dejemos claro que queremos entrar de forma simultánea. Es urgente entrar en la OTAN porque queremos mandar ese mensaje a Rusia, pero queremos entrar simultáneamente junto a Suecia. Primero de los dos mensajes que ha dejado Sanna Marin. El otro, muy claro también, Rusia es nuestro vecino y cuando se pone a atacar a otros vecinos nuestros, como está ocurriendo en el caso de Ucrania, lo que siente Finlandia es que necesita preservar su soberanía nacional, necesita preservar su independencia y por eso la entrada en la OTAN de Finlandia es para ella un acto de paz. Hasta aquí de momento dos grandes mensajes también de Sanna Marin, de la primera ministra finlandesa.
Can you keep all your fractious members on board and people, 500 million people in the bloc?
Absolutely. I'm today more convinced than I was a year ago. But to set the record straight, indeed, our American friends, way more than a year ago, started to do something completely unprecedented, that they took their intelligence and knowledge and put it on the public market. This gave us an early warning. And my cabinet and the Commission started to work with the White House and with the Treasury already in December on potential sanctions in case that Russia would invade Ukraine. Indeed, we all hoped that it would never happen and we would never have to use these sanctions. But it was a tedious work day and night to align our very different trade systems, to develop sanctions that are targeted at advanced technologies and goods that are irreplaceable for Russia, and to be completely synchronized also within the G7. This made it possible that on day 2, day 4, and day 10 of the invasion, we were able to put on the table very heavy sanction packages. So there was
importante también esto que está diciendo Ursula Von der Leyen, dice que en diciembre ya del pasado 2021, por si Rusia invadía Ucrania, ya estaban ellos preparando sanciones tanto con el Tesoro como con el Banco Central Europeo, como con la propia Comisión y con Estados Unidos. Y eso dice que hizo posible que en el día 2, en el día 4 y en el día 10 de la invasión de Ucrania por parte de Rusia pusieran en marcha esas sanciones.
Of course, we have many issues that we discuss. But here, from day one on, we were standing as one. We were united. We are united. And if you look back, I mean, through all the crises we have gone, including the energy crisis, and we have mastered it. Today, I can really say I'm deeply convinced that we will keep the unity and we will keep the determination because it's about our values and our very existence we are fighting for.
Looking back 3 steps. First, when the war started, we were prepared and the Commission was prepared, making the sanctions together with all our allies, and we were very fast of putting those sanctions on place. So we were prepared on that stage, that way. But looking back, now it was obvious that Russia will attack. We didn't want to believe it. We tried everything that we could to make a diplomatic solution, and that was, of course, the right effort to do, to trying to make a diplomatic solution. But looking back, it was obvious that Russia will attack Ukraine. They already used the energy leverage during that summer, during that autumn, they already used the energy leverage. There was different kind of disruptions with the energy flows during that year of 2021. They had put their troops in different places, saying that they are only training. Looking back now, it was obvious that they were planning this big attack against Ukraine. And then looking way back to 2014, when the Crimea was invaded, we made a big mistake then. We make a big mistake then together not to react more strongly. If we had acted and reacted more strongly towards the Crimea, then the war wouldn't happen. I think Russia thought that it would be just like Crimea, just entering Ukraine. Ukraine would give them open welcome. It would last only for a few weeks, and Putin would win very quickly and easily the war, because we didn't react 2014. And now we have to learn some lessons.
Bueno, Sana Marin, vistiéndose de gusto en Putin, dice que cometieron un error, que todos cometimos un error en el viejo continente al permitir que Rusia se hiciera con Crimea y no hacer nada, al más puro estilo de lo que quizá ocurriera con los fuertes en aquella Segunda Guerra Mundial, cuando Putin pronunció aquella frase diciendo que entre el deshonor y la guerra se había elegido el deshonor y que este nos iba a llevar la guerra. Bueno, Sana Marin, en una línea parecida, cometimos un error conjunto, un error muy grave al no actuar con mayor fortaleza, al no actuar con mayor determinación y fuerza contra Rusia, cuando se
we are investing in our defense capabilities, that we have that leverage and that we have also that threat present, that these authoritarian countries where Russia is a terrible example, that they don't use force because they are also, and they have to think also twice, will they use the force and what will be the consequences?
Therefore, and this is the question, and we're trying to figure this out. What does winning look like to you all? You all have said very strongly what you've just said, Prime Minister. But what does winning look like? And in for a penny, in for a pound, surely. Surely you have to go to the very end, giving all the support that Ukraine needs to fight this war for them and for you. Are you worried? Ammunition production is not up and running like it should.
Pero bueno, de momento destacar esto que saco. Por un lado, Von der Leyen avisa de que ya habían preparado sanciones en diciembre del 21 por si Rusia invadía Ucrania, que esperaban que no pasara, dice, pero que por si pasaba. Y por el otro lado, importante esto que ha dicho Sana Marin, reconociendo que se actuó, dice, con poca dureza contra Rusia cuando se anexionó Crimea, y que eso es lo que ha hecho que Rusia, evidentemente, pensase que puede hacerse con el resto del territorio ucraniano. Sana Marin, que de todas formas, cada vez que habla, levanta el aplauso del personal allí en esa conferencia de Múnich. Volvemos, por cierto, hasta allí, con Ursula Von der Leyen, la presidenta de la Comisión Europea, y en algunos en esta forma llaman Ursula Von der Leyen. Ahí en
Putin will completely fail. This is one goal, and that Ukraine is able to win. And what the military support is concerned, indeed, I think it's now the time really to speed up the production and to scale up the production of standardized products that Ukraine needs desperately. For example, the standardized ammunition. It cannot be that we have to wait months and years till we are able to replenish or till we are able to deliver that to Ukraine. What I thought is that we now take the European Peace Facility. It is in place. It is there to typically fund that member states give military equipment to Ukraine. So it's an established body. It has a coordination mechanism with Ukraine, and that we convene the defense industry of Europe, and we very clearly ask them, what is it what you need to scale up and to speed up standardized products? I'm not speaking about the highly complex production of specific things, but the standardized products like 155 millimeters artillery, for example. So need now to do the same like we've done during the pandemic. There too, we've said, look to the pharmaceutical companies. Yeah. What is it what you need to scale up? We could think of, for example, advanced purchase agreements that gives the defense industry the possibility to invest in production lines now to be faster and to increase the amount they can deliver. And therefore, it is for us paramount now to support Ukraine in these existential things. I think a second element we should not underestimate is the economic security of Ukraine. Ukraine needs to survive economically. And there, it's good that we now have decided to have a regularly budget support for Ukraine, 1.5 billion per month by the European Union. Our American friends are matching that. And I think the international financial institutions should do more for that also. Okay. So it is the time to step up because Ukraine really needs the material to survive.
Well, what is a win for Ukraine? That's the Ukrainians.
Bueno, brevemente sobre Von der Leyen y enseguida vamos con Sanna Marin. Von der Leyen hablando de que, y es curioso, con la que tiene encima aliada, con una denuncia del New York Times por las compras conjuntas de la pandemia de las que no legislaciones, porque se intercambió mensajes con el CEO de Pfizer, con Albert Bourla, y no ha explicado nada. Y además dice que son mensajes efímeros. Bueno, pues con toda la que se lió, dice Von der Leyen que Europa necesita, de cara a dar más apoyo en defensa a Ucrania, dice que lo que se necesita es compras conjuntas. Inversiones conjuntas, ahora iba a decir, en realidad más que compras, y que hay que acelerar ese tipo de inversiones. Vamos con Sanna Marin y enseguida le vamos dando más detalles.
Heavier weaponry that they have already received. And we have to send a clear message that we will continue this as long as it takes, as long as it's needed. They need financial help, they need humanitarian help, they need help rebuilding already the infrastructure. They are not waiting end of the war and then building Ukraine. They have to build it every day because Russia is attacking all the infrastructure very heavily. So we need to give them help, whatever they need. And it's their job to decide what are the terms that they could agree, what are the victory points that they need to receive. I think that Russia should leave Ukraine
and they think that too.
In every territory, but it's their decision.
Yeah. Okay. I think a very important headline is always for us, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. Right. They have to decide what for them finally is the point to sit down at the negotiation.
I mean, to be fair, they have laid it out in 10-point plans, 5-point
which is good and which we fully support.
I need to go to audience questions.
Nada de lo que ocurra en Ucrania debe decidirse en Ucrania. Acaba de decir Ursula Von der Leyen. Lo dice al calor de todo lo que venía diciendo Sanna Marin de las necesidades que cree, en su opinión, o que le están trasladando los equipos de Zelensky o miembros del gabinete de presidencia ucraniano, pero que necesitan ayuda humanitaria, que necesitan también personal, que necesitan de todo. Lo que no ha mencionado de momento es que necesiten militares profesos de otros países. Lo digo sobre todo porque mandar armamento está muy bien, pero desde Negocios Televisión ya les hemos comentado en varias ocasiones y lo hemos analizado con los mejores expertos, que mandar tanques está muy bien, mandar incluso aviones puede estar fenomenal, pero lo demás quién los va a pilotar porque son una serie de materiales de guerra que requieren evidentemente años de instrucción militar para poder ser manejados con cierta pericia. Entonces vamos a ver cómo ocurre todo esto. De momento no se habla del envío de tropas. Sanna Marin, la primera ministra finlandesa, habla del envío de ayuda humanitaria, de las necesidades que tienen en Ucrania e insisto, corrige Von der Leyen, nada de Ucrania debe decidirse en Ucrania. Habla la propia presidenta de la Comisión Europea.
But then it was Putin who within 8 months cut 80% of the pipeline gas supply to the European Union. From the Russian gas. Also thanks to the stepping up of our friends, the United States with LNG, Norway with more pipeline gas. But more important is even that it accelerated our work in the European Green Deal. So we heavily invested in renewable energy, which is homegrown, it gives us independence, and it's clean. We have doubled the additional deployment of renewables last year in the European Union, and last year, for the very first time, wind and solar delivered more electricity than gas did. What the other countries are concerned, because and important is that we keep in mind that the tightness, the energy tightness of the global market is due to Russia's invasion in Ukraine. We should never forget that. But what indeed other countries are that suffer also from this energy crisis, what they are concerned, for us is important that our work together, for example, with the Global South, with Africa, is intensified on investment in infrastructure to have renewable energy. to produce, for example, green hydrogen. We're working now with the other side of the Mediterranean exactly on that one. So the big paradox of this conflict is if there's an accelerator for the European Green Deal and for global infrastructure in renewable energy, then it's Putin and with his atrocious war.
Yes?
Alex Sikorski, member of the European Parliament. My question is to the President of the Council, of the Commission, of course. We were lucky that the United States had Joe Biden as president when Putin invaded, and that they took the lead on helping Ukraine.
Bueno, la pregunta ya viene con trampa, porque dice directamente que tenemos suerte de que Joe Biden esté al frente de lo que está ocurriendo, ¿no? en Estados Unidos, y que por esa razón le haya dado, bueno, pues todo el liderazgo, haya podido liderar toda la respuesta en Ucrania. Recopilando un poco, mientras hacen la pregunta, recopilando lo que acaba de decir Ursula Von der Leyen, cuidado porque se ha referido a los precios, a las tensiones energéticas, a esa crisis energética que se nos ha levantado encima, dice que es culpa de la invasión de Rusia en Ucrania, y su solución ha sido decir que se está invirtiendo y que la Comisión lo que está planeando, Europa está planeando una serie de expansiones y de inversiones en África que le permitan alternar de dónde se demanda precisamente la energía. Vamos con Ursula Von der Leyen.
To support Ukraine and to fight side by side with us for the defense of our values, without any question. What our defense capabilities are concerned, of course, it's sovereign decisions of the member states, but indeed, we have progressed a lot in the European Union what harmonizing of the approach to the defense capabilities is concerned. It has very weird names, acronyms like PESCO, like CARD, you name it. But this is good. Thanks God we have it in place. We can build on that one. But yes, the emphasis has to be on a stronger defense posture.
Prime Minister Marin, do you think your country, your people, your policies, because it's you who have to do that, it's each country that has to decide, right? Are you ready? Because we heard that the peace dividend, we're out of that time now. Your defense budgets have to be ramped up.
Well, actually, Finland has always invested heavily on defense because we are a next door neighbor to Russia. We are already using up to 2% of our budget to defense, and we will increase this even more so because we want to be prepared. And actually, when we look back at this war and the energy crisis that we are in, Finland already diversified our energy mix way before the war because we have aggressive neighbor and we don't want that kind of dependencies that many other countries have had. I understand the logic, and it's very logical to build those very close economic connections and ties to try to make sure that the war wouldn't happen because we have such a close ties. It would be so costly that we couldn't then see these kind of devastating things happening. But this wasn't the case because the authoritarian regimes, they think differently. And in the future, we have to be more prepared also when it comes, for example, new technologies. And I totally agree. I think United States, they will look towards Asia, even more so in the future. And we have to make sure that we are not dependent on those critical matters that we are too dependent now. During the pandemic, we were too dependent on medicine, we were too dependent on medical equipment. On the energy crisis, we are too dependent on Russian fossil fuels. Luckily and thankfully, we have done very much to get rid of those connections. But in the future, the big issue will be new technologies. Technologies, know-how, knowledge. So we have to also invest in our education system, the know-how, the knowledge base, and new technologies that we are not dependent on authoritarian countries from the East, because there might be dark clouds also in that direction. And if we have those connections, if we are too dependent, then we are also we cannot be sure that we are secure in that perspective as well. So our job is to make sure that our citizens, our societies will cope whatever happens in the world. So we have to invest, European Union have to invest, and also member states has to invest more in these critical matters.
I would like to, before I go to the audience again, if I get some time, I need to ask you both a question about the 50%. This conference is meant to be, 50% women.
Bueno, me permiten importantes porque acaba de decir Sanna Marin y no es ninguna tontería. Dice que durante la pandemia se dependió y mucho de todo lo que había en los alrededores y que en ese sentido se tiene que parar, porque lo que ocurre es que Europa no tiene una independencia, no tiene una fuerza suelta que le permita pues estar con su propio know-how y sus propias inversiones salir de aquí. En este sentido dice que hay que pensar también más allá de la propia guerra, más allá de lo que está ocurriendo. Efectivamente dice hay que agradecer a Estados Unidos cierta parte de lo que está haciendo, pero deja caer un dardo, y es que la dependencia de Europa de la energía de Estados Unidos ahora está siendo crucial, importantísima. Y dice Sanna Marin, esto no puede seguir pasando, no puede ser que tengamos que mirar o aquí o a China, hay que intentar realizar esas inversiones. Vamos de nuevo hasta allí, vuelve a hablar la primera ministra de Finlandia.
That's a good thing.
But Prime Minister, that's all good, but if I was targeting to you, I would ask you, why did you have to apologize for being a human being? You were found dancing. Oh my goodness, how awful.
Yeah.
And you had to apologize for being a human being. Why?
And I have also danced after that, that one time. I think there's a lot to be done when it comes to gender equality. It's very important that we have people from different backgrounds, different genders, but also different backgrounds in decision-making places at the same table making the decisions, because then we have the perspective of everyone. Women are the 50% of the world, so women need to be 50% of the decision-making bodies. I know that Ursula and the Commission is preparing to set a bill for companies to have more women representatives on the boards of companies. I think this is a very important step forward. I think also in the political system we have to make sure that women have the possibilities to step up, to have their voices heard. There are a lot of structures within our political systems that actually prevent women to get those positions, to be heard. Many times it's enough that there's one woman. Look, we have this women here, no problem. We have women here, no problem. But we need more women, and we need really that 50% to make sure that everybody's voices are heard.
Sanna Marin explicando en este sentido le preguntan por la proporción de mujeres a la presidenta de la Comisión Europea y a la primera ministra de Finlandia, ¿no? Dicen que, claro, representan la mitad del mundo y deberían ocupar en ese sentido la mitad también de las administraciones que ya hemos visto que se ha tenido en distintas instituciones y que en general Europa viene abundando en ello, incluso aquí en España, a través de las leyes de discriminación positiva que se dejaron, intenta efectivamente equilibrar los puestos de mujeres dentro de los consejos de administración de las grandes empresas o pequeñas compañías, incluso, dependiendo del tamaño, no se va a pyme, pero sí que es verdad que pues se intenta equilibrar esa posición de mujeres y hombres dentro de los distintos consejos, dentro de las instituciones, y dice Sanna Marin que también debiera dentro de la política. Vamos hasta Múnich, vámonos con Ursula Von der Leyen.
That there are more women coming, growing up to the top. Of course, it's also a question of infrastructure. So I vividly remember my most difficult time were the first years as a minister with small children. And all these hidden prejudices, I got the question, I mean, in talks like these ones, have you already decided whether you want to be a bad mother or a bad minister? So there was this hidden prejudice. You cannot be either a good minister or a good mother if you are a working mom. We all know these prejudices. What we have to do is make sure that the infrastructure is there, that you have for young couples support with what is necessary in kindergarten, childcare, and good schools. We have to make sure that till we have an equal distribution of men and women in positions of powers. I'm an advocate for a quota. That's the reason why we introduced a quota in Germany. That's the reason why we introduced the quota now on the European level, because the time till women kind of grow naturally through the ranks is just too long. And therefore, still a lot is to do, but I can only recommend to women, hang on there, because we need you, we need your voice, and it's absolutely important that you're there.
I must add, thank you, Ursula. I must add.
Bueno, levanta Von der Leyen diciendo que necesitan a las mujeres, que necesitan que den ese paso al frente también para liderar y para estar en esas instituciones como está comentando. Y vuelve a levantar también los aplausos de la sala, que esta mañana desde luego está entregado, parece. Volvemos con Sana Marín.
So he did make that decision to went to a parental leave because they had a small child. So it's not only a job for mothers, it's also a job for fathers to take the time to spend it with your child, even though there's war in Europe, even though Finland is joining NATO. Our defense minister, Antti Kaikkonen, decided that his child is small only once, and he did take that parental leave. And I'm so happy that this is the equality in Finland.
One little anecdote, if I may.
Okay, they're making me rap, but hurry.
Okay, I had decided to have a gender-based college in the Commission, and I have to ask member states to send me candidates. So I told him, you send me a man and a woman, that I can choose my commissioners for the college. You can't imagine the outcry on that one. There were member states who sent me 3 men to choose from. So in the very end, I have my gender-balanced college. So be stubborn and stay on the topic, then you will be successful.
Well, 2 great examples. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, Prime Minister of Finland, Sanna Marin, thank you very much for joining.
Bueno, pues hasta aquí esta charla entre Sanna Marin y, como pueden ver, también entre, bueno, no solo Sanna Marin, sino también Ursula Von der Leyen, la presidenta de la Comisión Europea, una presidenta que curiosamente se ha lanzado a hablar de compras conjuntas, de que la inversión se debe realizar también de forma conjunta por parte de Europa si quieren volver a implementar y hacer que el ámbito de defensa de la propia Unión Europea crezca rápido y se pueda suplir todo lo que está ocurriendo precisamente en Ucrania, se pueda abastecer precisamente a Ucrania y no solo eso, no quedar desatendidos desde el viejo continente cuando se manden todos estos tanques, cuando se envíen todos estos aviones y se terminan enviando, pero sobre todo municiones, etcétera. Bueno, Von der Leyen hablando de que hay que hacer esas inversiones conjuntas, Von der Leyen hablando de que no se puede tolerar ni permitir que nadie traspase una frontera en Europa con un tanque y con eso se crea que se va a terminar todo y va a poder hacerse con ese país y va a invadirlo sin problemas. Y, por su parte, Sanna Marin, la primera ministra de Finlandia, ha ido un paso más allá. No es que condene, no es que le parezca mal, no es que esté hablando de que no se puede permitir esa invasión, sino que es que además ha hablado del error cometido, dice, por Europa cuando se permitió que se invadiera Crimea con esa facilidad. Y esa invasión que terminó en una anexión por parte de Rusia de esa región de Crimea, pues ha terminado pasando factura porque efectivamente Rusia sigue adelante y sigue intentando anexionarse otras partes de Ucrania en esta, como se puede ver en esta invasión, ¿no? Una reflexión similar a esa que en su momento hiciera Winston Churchill sobre la parte de los Sudetes durante la Segunda Guerra Mundial. Importante lo que está ocurriendo ahí. Han hablado también del papel de la mujer, de que debe, bueno, pues tener un mayor protagonismo. Sanna Marin también ha hecho la clásica broma sobre si es o no la más joven dentro de esos primeros ministros. Habla de que ya no lo es, porque en Austria hay uno más joven que ella. Bueno, ahí están algunas de las cuestiones. Y tal y como les veníamos contando desde el principio, no han hablado de cuestiones que, bueno, tienen su dificultad y su particularidad en el sentido de que no ha explicado que, oiga, los mensajes que se intercambiaba señora Von der Leyen con el CEO de Pfizer durante la pandemia para esas compras conjuntas, ¿de qué iban? Porque dicen ustedes, es material efímero. Bueno, debiera de ser transparente también contarnos qué había ahí. En fin, Wolfgang Ischinger, ahora mismo en el estrado, el presidente de esa conferencia de Seguridad de Múnich, embajador retirado también de Alemania, va a presentar, entre otras cosas, a Wang Yi, el director de la Oficina de Asuntos Extranjeros del gobierno chino. Ojo, porque importante, muy importante todo lo que pueda decir Wang Yi ahora, especialmente si se pronuncia sobre Rusia. No creo que hablen de los globos y los ovnis en Estados Unidos, pero poco le puede faltar. Wang Yi, que desde luego cualquier cuestión que diga sobre Rusia hay que tomarla con muchísima consideración, hay que tener en cuenta y recordar también que China es el principal aliado de Rusia, sobre todo en lo que es el abastecimiento de dinero, ¿no? Al final China es quien está sustituyendo a Europa ahora mismo como el demandante de la energía rusa, al margen de que Europa no haya cortado para nada la totalidad de esos envíos, sino que los compra a mayor precio, pero bueno, el caso es que China está sustituyendo a Europa y vamos a ir hasta allí a ver qué dice Wang Yi con esa presentación, insisto, de Wolfgang Ischinger, el ex embajador y el director, el presidente de esta Conferencia de Seguridad de Múnich. Ahí tienen ahora mismo enfocando en plano a Wang Yi. Vamos a ver qué comentan ambos sobre estos asuntos y si nos explican también qué está ocurriendo exactamente con la guerra. Lo digo porque China no se suele mojar en este asunto, suele decir que es un asunto de algo que está ocurriendo en Europa, pero la realidad es que es quien está dotando materialmente de dinero. Ahí lo tienen, ya ha presentado Ischinger a Wang Yi, que sube al escenario. Vamos a ver cuál es el discurso que da. No les molesto yo, según lo vaya comentando el propio Wang Yi, tratamos también de irles dando traducción para contarles lo que está ocurriendo, insisto, en un momento particularmente delicado en el que China tiene mucho que decir. Vamos hasta allí.
I will speak Chinese. 各位朋友，各位同事，大家好。
Dear friends, colleagues, I am delighted to join you in person at the Munich Security Conference after 3 years and meet face-to-face with friends old and new. I recall vividly how I came here with the Chinese delegation 3 years ago when COVID-19 just struck. You, Mr. Ischinger, chaired and moderated the Conversation with China session. I presented China's efforts in fighting the virus and urged solidarity among countries in face of the trying times. The international community gave China valuable support and understanding, for which we are deeply grateful. Humanity's 3-year fight against COVID-19 tells us a simple truth. As President Xi Jinping repeatedly stressed, we are members of one global village, and we belong to one community with a shared future. We can't overcome challenges when we stand together. We can win victory and we trust each other. 3 years on, the pandemic is contained, but the world is not yet safer. Trust between major countries is lacking. Geopolitical rifts are widening. Unilateralism is rampant. The Cold War mentality is back. New types of security threats from energy, food, climate, biosecurity, and artificial intelligence keep emerging. Standing at a critical juncture of history, human society must not repeat the path of antagonism, division, and confrontation, and must not fall into the trap of zero-sum game, war, and conflict. Making the world a safer place is the strong desire of all people, the common responsibility of all countries, and more importantly, the right direction for the advance of our times. For a safer world, the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries must be respected. Power politics and hegemony are a recipe for global instability and do the biggest damage to global peace. Interference in other countries' internal affairs, in whatever name, disregards and defies the basic norms of international relations. Any violation of the One China principle on the Taiwan question, an attempt to create one China, one Taiwan, or two Chinas, however framed, are a gross infringement on China's territorial integrity and pose real threats to peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. The principle of sovereignty is the cornerstone of the contemporary international order. All countries should abide by the principle in both words and deeds, rather than apply it selectively, still less with double standards. China will resolutely curb acts of separatism and interference to safeguard its sovereignty and territorial integrity. For a safer world, disputes should be peacefully resolved through dialogue and consultation. Disagreements and frictions do exist between countries, yet handling them with pressuring, smear campaigns, or unilateral sanctions is often counterproductive and may even entail endless trouble. However complex the issue is, dialogue and consultation should not be abandoned. However intense the dispute is, a political resolution should be pursued. However difficult the situation is, peace should be given a chance. China follows a new vision.
Bueno, Wang Yi, desde la Secretaría de Exteriores de la República Popular de China, explicando ahora detalles importantes. Vamos a intentar analizarlo todo porque, así como podía parecer que le daba un palo a Rusia diciendo hay que respetar la integridad y las fronteras de cada país en sí mismo y su soberanía, en realidad no habla tanto, cuidado con esto y con lo que está haciendo Wang Yi, no habla tanto de lo que ocurre con Rusia y Ucrania, sino que explica muy claramente que Taiwán sigue siendo China. Lo digo porque después de añadir que hay que respetar esas fronteras y que hay que respetar esa soberanía, la siguiente frase de Wang Yi es: nosotros es lo que hacemos cuando hablamos de la política de una sola China. Importante este detalle, sobre todo por las que se traen con Estados Unidos y esa deriva que están teniendo a cuenta no solo del globo espía chino y del que no haya derivado Estados Unidos, sino de los semiconductores, del siguiente salto tecnológico y de la posibilidad de que incluso se acabe quitando su territorio especial, como es considerado Taiwán, dentro de China, que en realidad Estados Unidos está utilizando como su particular fábrica de semiconductores en el mundo. Vámonos de nuevo hasta allí a ver qué sigue diciendo Wang Yi.
Above one's own lesser interest and work together to oppose Cold War mentality and bloc confrontation. For a safer world, the key role of development must be harnessed. The world should not be a place where the rich stay rich while the poor remain poor. Efforts should be stepped up in implementing the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The legitimate right to development of all countries, especially developing countries, should be effectively protected, and assistance should be extended to underdeveloped regions to improve people's lives and grow the economy. A holistic approach is needed to address both symptoms and root causes and remove the breeding ground for conflict. The world should not veer off onto the wrong path of protectionism, decoupling, and cutting chains. We must firmly reject the attempts to politicize, weaponize, and draw ideological lines in the cooperation on trade, science, and technology. If security is to be firmly established and endure, people in all countries should get to lead a better life. Making the world a safer place is China's abiding commitment. Last October, the Communist Party of China convened its 20th National Congress. General Secretary Xi Jinping declared that China's central task in the new era and on the new journey is to advance the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation on all fronts through a Chinese path to modernization. On how to accomplish this modernization of the largest scale in human history, China has given an unequivocal and steadfast answer: keeping to peaceful development. Peaceful development is not an expediency nor diplomatic rhetoric, but a strategic choice informed by a deep
importante estas cuestiones que estamos escuchando ahora mismo. De hecho, lo que estamos viendo es precisamente que Wang Yi habla de la modernización de toda China y cómo se han ido volcando en esa modernización, qué es lo que estaban buscando. Hablan de esa salida al mundo y está hablando Wang Yi de no hacer para nada una política de aislacionismo, por más que se quiera decir, sino que está hablando ampliamente, como pueden ver, de que aunque quieran ser una sola China, un solo país, lo que quieren también es colaborar, respetar las fronteras de todo el mundo, en ese doble mensaje que viene dando desde la Secretaría de Exteriores de la República Popular China. Lo que no ha dicho, desde luego, es nada, como bien estáis diciendo por los comentarios, del Nord Stream, de los globos, incluso ni siquiera de Rusia, como una mención absolutamente directa a ello. Volvemos hasta allí.
Development and deliver a better life for the Chinese people. We know fully well that development is only possible in a peaceful and tranquil international environment. This requires that China lives in peace with other countries and pursues win-win cooperation with the rest of the world. We will always be an advocate for peace, development, and win-win cooperation, and work to deepen and expand global partnerships based on equality, openness, and cooperation. Looking to the future, peace and development remain the trend of history and the aspiration of the people. Some people assert that a strong country is bound to seek hegemony and assume that China will walk away from peaceful development as it gets stronger. However, China's own experience shows that the path of peaceful development has worked, and worked well. There is no reason for us to discontinue, but every reason to stay the course and come together with more countries in the pursuit of peaceful development. Any increase in China's strength is an increase in the hope of world peace. When all countries pursue peaceful development, the future of humanity will be full of promise. With a keen grasp of the changing world, President Xi Jinping put forward the Global Development Initiative, GDI, and the Global Security Initiative, GSI, in recent years, offering China's proposals and wisdom for advancing peace and development, the two main issues facing humanity. As of now, more than 100 countries and international organizations, including the UN, have expressed support for the two initiatives. Some 70 countries have joined the group of friends of the GDI. I am pleased to announce here that China will be launching a GSI concept paper to lay out a more systematic approach and more practical measures to address global security challenges. We welcome your active participation.
Bueno, Guanyi, hablando ahora del concepto de seguridad global, o no, también de ese concepto de seguridad digital y de que todos los países tienen que estar en este sentido unidos. Ojo porque Guanyi también se ha referido a todo lo que ocurre, en este caso no con Estados Unidos directamente, pero sí ha hablado incluso de Naciones Unidas, de cómo ese concepto de seguridad global tiene que ser implementado por todos, que hay más de 70 países, sumándose mucho a la iniciativa de China, de que esa red de seguridad tenga también mucho que ver con ese entorno digital y que todo el mundo esté preparado para evitar determinadas situaciones de guerra. De hecho, ha dicho que China trabaja siempre por el camino de la paz, que ahí es donde les van a encontrar, y que en cualquier conversación que se pueda iniciar de paz, una clara referencia a Ucrania, va a tener a China como aliado, porque lo que hay que conseguir precisamente mediante el diálogo es terminar con esta situación de guerra.
Marking the end of a war and embodying the wish for lasting peace. Long as the journey is, we will reach our destination if we stay the course. Difficult as the task is, we will get the job done if we keep working at it. Let us all join hands and work together to make the world a safer place. Now, I'm happy to take your questions and exchange views with you. Thank you.
Yeah. Bueno, hasta aquí ese speech introductorio de Guanyi, que ahora se va a sentar, como les comentábamos, con Wolfgang Ischinger, con el presidente de esta Conferencia de Seguridad de Múnich, ex embajador también alemán en este sentido, y vamos a ver si le arranca algo más con las preguntas y sobre todo si logra que Guanyi sea un poco más directo con las apreciaciones, aunque en cierta medida hablando de la paz o del respeto hacia las soberanías, seguramente ya lo ha venido siendo. Vamos hasta allí de nuevo.
For your presentation. You mentioned early on in your remarks, you referred to the war in Ukraine. And I would like to ask a follow-up question on that. But before I do that, I want to attract your personal attention and that of your delegation and that of all the participants in this hall here today, that we have not more than 30 seconds or a minute from the hall in the building here, an exhibition about Russian war crimes. And I invite everybody, including certainly the Chinese delegation, to take a moment during the day to look at these rather gripping photographs and videos. I think it's an essential element of our proceedings here today. Now, My question is a very simple one, actually. A year ago, when you appeared on the video screen and you could not be here physically because of the, at that time, continuing pandemic situation, you stated that China respects the territorial integrity, the sovereignty of Ukraine. If I remember correctly, you said just like we respect the territorial integrity of any other member state of the United Nations. Now, that was a remark made 4 days before the outbreak of the current war of aggression. And my very simple question to you is, now that we have had for 12 months this ongoing war, is China prepared to act on its position that it respects the territorial integrity? And if you are prepared to act, what are you prepared to do? You spoke in your remarks of your willingness to participate in the reflection of how to bring about peace. So could you elaborate a little bit on that? Thank you.
乌克兰危机，乌克兰的危机不是我们愿意看到的。
To see the crisis in Ukraine. And we are deeply concerned by the expanded and extended crisis. We are not a party directly concerned, but we did not sit idly by. We do not add fuel to the fire, and we are against reaping benefits from this crisis. What we have been doing is to facilitate peace talks, but we stand on the side of peace and dialogue. As a matter of fact, since the second day of the crisis, on the 25th of February, President Xi Jinping suggested that Russia and Ukraine sit down together and talk to each other to seek political settlement of the crisis. In Belarus, in Turkey, there were multiple rounds of peace talks. And we saw a framework text on the peaceful resolution of the crisis. However, that was stopped. We did not know why the process was cut short. Some forces might not want to see peace talks to materialize. They don't care about the life and death of Ukrainians, not the harms on Europe. They might have strategic goals larger than Ukraine itself. This warfare must not continue. During his meeting with European leaders, President Xi Jinping said clearly that conflicts and wars produce no winner. Complicated issues cannot be solved by simple solutions. Major country confrontation must be averted. We can state our positions on this stage, but at the same time, we need to think calmly, especially our friends in Europe, about what efforts should be made to stop the warfare, what framework should there be to bring lasting peace to Europe, what role should Europe play to manifest its strategic autonomy. The more difficult situation is we cannot abandon efforts to seek peace. We are approaching the 1-year anniversary. China will put forth a position paper on the political settlement of the Ukraine issue. We will reiterate the propositions made by President Xi Jinping in our position paper, including that territorial integrity and sovereignty must be respected, purposes and principles of the UN Charter be observed, legitimate security concerns be taken seriously, and all efforts conducive to the peaceful settlement of the crisis be supported. We will also reiterate that nuclear wars must not be fought and will not be won. We must oppose such an incident. We will call on efforts to oppose attacks on nuclear power stations and nuclear facilities for peaceful use in order to prevent nuclear catastrophe.
Vamos a ver si ordenamos todo esto. Perdónenme que corte un momentito a Wang Yi, que se le veía que terminaba. Habla ahora de que hay que prevenir una guerra nuclear. Le han preguntado directamente, oiga, usted dijo que respetaba la soberanía de Ucrania, que respetaba el territorio de Ucrania hace casi un año aquí en el vídeo. Y en vez de decir nada de eso, está hablando de la paz en un ejercicio de funamburismo brutal, intentando no mencionar con su trapecio ni pisar a Ucrania, ni pisar a Estados Unidos, ni pisar a Europa, no pisar nada. Está haciendo espectacular el movimiento de Wang Yi para no hacerle daño a nadie. Que hay que buscar la paz, que China trabaja por la paz, que han intentado facilitar precisamente los encuentros con Turquía, y entonces hasta 3 lugares diferentes, aunque no se tiene constancia de estas últimas reuniones de paz, la verdad. Es verdad que Turquía se ofreció al principio y es verdad que lo ha hecho Alexander Lukashenko, desde Bielorrusia hace apenas unos días, en un escenario. Hombre, el escenario puede ser, pero que Lukashenko sea interlocutor es algo raro en una negociación de paz. El caso es que Wang Yi esquiva absolutamente todo, dice que respetan la soberanía nacional, pero ha preferido no mencionar la Ucrania en concreto, que era lo que le habían preguntado. Eso no lo ha dicho. Sale por las de Villadeo, como se suele decir por aquí, por esta región, y no responde a la cuestión. Lo que sí dice es que hay que intentar evitar, porque las guerras no dejan ganadores, ha dicho, hay que intentar evitar a toda costa lo que puede convertirse en una catástrofe nuclear. Volvemos allí, volvemos en este caso con Wolfgang Ischinger, el ex embajador alemán, el presidente de esta conferencia de Múnich, ahora mismo entrevistando a Wang Yi desde la Secretaría de Exterior de la República Popular de China.
Above and beyond the balloon crisis, but my impression has been that the balloon crisis has stood in the way of returning to a more normal discussion.
Ojo, el balloon crisis. Vamos con el globo. Vamos a ver si dice algo.
好像这个气球事情
It seems that everyone is following very closely the balloon incident and has become the center of heated discussions. I'll talk about some facts. We have very clearly told the United States this is an unmanned airship that is civilian in nature. It has limited self-steering capability and veered off course into the United States due to westerly influence. We asked the United States to handle it calmly and professionally based on consultation with the Chinese side. Regrettably, the United States disregards these facts and use advanced fighter jets and downed a balloon with its missiles. This is, I would say, absurd and hysterical. This is 100% abuse of the use of force. It is a violation of international customary practice, in particular, the Chicago Convention on International Civil Aviation. We do not accept this. We have lodged démarche against the United States. Across the globe, there are many balloons in the sky from different countries. Do you want to down each and every one of them? It does not show America is strong. On the contrary, it shows the opposite. We urge the United States not to do such preposterous things simply to divert attention from its domestic problems. We also urge the United States to be more sincere, rectifying its wrong approach and undo the negative impact such measures have on China-US relations. Why such sensation? The basic context is misperception of the United States and a strategic miscalculation on the part of the US. China's position to the United States is clear and transparent. Mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and win-win cooperation. These are the principles, the three principles on how we get along with the United States, how two major countries with different systems can get along with each other in the world. What response do we get? The response from the US side is that the US says China is a serious geopolitical challenge, a long-term competitor, and a threat to the United States. This, I would say, is a misguided China perception. With this perception, the United States is using all of its means to clamp down and smear China, and is co-opting other countries to do the same. China said or stated that it wants to compete with China. We are not afraid of competition, but we want a fair and rules-based competition. The United States is not doing it. For instance, the CHIPS Act. This act is 100% protectionism, 100% selfishness, 100% unilateral action. It is in serious violation of the principle of free trade, the rules of WTO. This, by no means, is fair competition. It cannot be farther away from free competition. The US is standing on the opposite side of free trade that has long espoused. This is pretty ironic. In ancient China, we Chinese often say that even if people loves benefits, they get it through fair means. Only people with selfish purposes will only get it with this extortion. The United States has only been extorting benefits. We do hope that the US side can view China's development objectively, impartially. Modernization of 1.4 billion people marks progress of humanity. I don't understand why the US is stopping this process. We hope the US side would take a pragmatic and proactive attitude towards China and work together with China to return our bilateral ties to a track of sound development. This not only meets the benefit of our two countries, but also of the international community. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bueno. Ha dicho muchísimas cosas. Vamos a ver si conseguimos analizarlas todas. La primera, que el derribo del globo chino, que para nada era un globo espía, es un abuso de fuerza por parte de los Estados Unidos y no lo vamos a aceptar, ha dicho. El propio Wang Yi se ha referido a esto como una forma de desviar los problemas internos de Estados Unidos, que bastante tiene. Hay que recordar que justo en esos momentos en los que se derribó el globo, se hablaba de que ellos habían destruido los gasoductos del Nord Stream, tanto el 1 como el 2, que estaba terminado, aunque no operativo, pero ya estaba acabado, y con eso quitaron la posibilidad de que Europa se abasteciera de otra manera. Se hablaba de eso y además tienen el desastre de Ohio en Estados Unidos, con ese desastre químico importante que de momento nadie quiere pagar, ni la FEMA, el Servicio de Emergencia de Estados Unidos, ni tampoco Norfolk Southern, que es la compañía que llevaba esos trenes. Bueno, hasta ahí, como acabamos de ver, lo que está ocurriendo con China, hasta aquí lo que está ocurriendo con Wang Yi, lo que ha dicho, pero les hacíamos ese resumen, les decíamos, no van a aceptar y no pueden aceptar ese derribo, ese abuso de fuerza llamado al derribo del globo chino por parte de los Estados Unidos. Y se ha referido también curiosamente, a lo que está ocurriendo con la situación de los microchips y del salto tecnológico que ha de darse. Dice en este sentido Wang Yi, desde la Secretaría de Exteriores de la República Popular de China, que lo que está haciendo Estados Unidos con el mercado de chips y semiconductores se llama extorsión. Que se dice pronto. Dice que está extorsionando, seguramente en referencia a Taiwán, pero ha dicho está extorsionando ciertos mercados para lograr un beneficio selfish, un beneficio absolutamente egoísta por parte de los Estados Unidos, que no busca que crezca el comercio mundial tal cual está establecido en los distintos tratados de comercio internacionales, sino que está buscando simplemente beneficiarse, y que eso se ve incluso en las leyes que están redactando. Seguramente una referencia también a la Inflation Reduction Act que ha puesto en marcha Joe Biden, y que en realidad son ayudas a todas las empresas que se quieran mudar desde cualquier otro estado precisamente allí, a Estados Unidos. Digo desde cualquier otro estado, desde cualquier otra nación, a Estados Unidos. Es una fórmula en la que, ya lo saben ustedes, se beneficia, por ejemplo, Hyundai y tantas otras se han trasladado algunas nuevas fábricas allí para poderse seguir beneficiando de unos descuentos que hacen, por ejemplo, con los vehículos eléctricos. En fin, Wang Yi, en la Conferencia de Seguridad de Múnich, explicando que no van a tolerar este tipo de ataques, que no los van a aceptar, que Estados Unidos está desviando la atención, que desde luego ellos están siendo bastante más cautos y bastante más responsables en todo esto que está ocurriendo. Además, se han metido con el asunto del globo, más allá de los semiconductores y de lo que está ocurriendo con ese salto tecnológico, en el que China lo que dice es que Estados Unidos está, rebasando por completo su autoridad y tratando de mover el mercado mediante lo que ha llamado extorsión, insisto, pero en referencia al famoso globo derribado, dice que lo han hecho con un abuso de fuerza y que además no es lo que dicen, que lo que están es desviando la atención de sus problemas, y que hay globos de este estilo en todas partes y de un sinfín de naciones que estaban ya ahí, que estaban antes, y que lo que se suele hacer cuando uno de estos globos, pues por la razón que sea, incluso por cambios meteorológicos, por el viento, porque se desplazan por N cuestiones, que lo que se suele hacer es avisar de que se ha avistado esto, descubrir de quién es la propiedad, algo que China admitió, efectivamente, decir, oye, el globo es mío, y desde ahí buscar una solución o tratar de reenfocar el problema para que el globo siga siendo operativo y para que China pueda volver a contar, China en este caso, pero quien sea, pueda volver a contar con algo que pertenece a su propia inteligencia. Y no hablan en China ahora de espionaje con este globo, sino que hablan de que era un globo satelital utilizado para otras cuestiones. Dijeron y dieron estas explicaciones en su momento. No es que las haya dado ahora Wang Yi, pero sí, en este sentido, el propio Wang Yi lo que estaba era explicando que para qué han derribado el globo si no es el protocolo. En fin, esto es lo que se está contando, lo que el propio Wang Yi desde esa conferencia ha trasladado. Nosotros vamos a hacer un brevísimo alto en el camino, recordándoles en todo caso, distintas cuestiones. La primera, que quien está a punto de aparecer por aquí es Jens Stoltenberg, el secretario general de la Organización del Tratado del Atlántico Norte, es decir, el secretario general de la OTAN, ya lo saben, que lo va a hacer, eso sí, en una mesa redonda, entre otras, pues con la República de Moldavia, con Maya Sandu, o con Heather Conley, que es quien va a moderar toda la mesa, que es, la fundadora de una fundación llamada German Marshall. También van a estar allí, junto a Stoltenberg y Maya Sandu, Mette Frederiksen, el primer ministro de Dinamarca, la primera ministra en este caso, y Sauli Niinisto, el presidente de la República de Finlandia. Importante esto porque en la OTAN quiere entrar Finlandia, y ¿a quién tiene ahí? Al presidente de Finlandia y al presidente de la OTAN. Y importante también el hecho de que esté aquí Maya Sandu, la presidenta de la República de Moldavia, en esa próxima, en lo que van a estar a punto de ver, en esa próxima mesa redonda. Digo que es importante porque Moldavia en los últimos tiempos ha tenido también grandes, diatribas con el asunto de Rusia, a cuenta de que aseguran desde Moldavia, y lo hizo la propia Maya Sandu, que tuvo que remodelar por completo su gobierno, que desde Bielorrusia se están intentando desestabilizar al gobierno moldavo. En este sentido, hablan de que se están metiendo ciertos grupos de presión que tienen mucho que ver con Rusia, y que a través de Bielorrusia precisamente lo que quieren es desestabilizar el gobierno de Moldavia, el gobierno de Maya Sandu, un gobierno que ha tenido que remodelar por completo por el intercambio de mensajes que habían tenido varios miembros precisamente de su gobierno con el estamento, con los más altos estamentos de Bielorrusia, también con ese gobierno bielorruso, y que, bueno, pues se ha quejado Sandu también ante Europa de esas injerencias y teme, dice, llegó a decir la propia Sandu, que se produjese después de lo de Ucrania una invasión hacia Moldavia, más allá incluso de las propias injerencias de los bielorrusos, que lo que estaban haciendo era meter pequeños grupos de presión. Bueno, si todo esto está ocurriendo o no, es algo que evidentemente Rusia también ha negado, y Bielorrusia, por supuesto, tanto Lukashenko como Vladimir Putin desde el Kremlin negaron esta cuestión. Tuvieron, por cierto, ambos un encuentro en la tarde de ayer y anteayer, en ese viaje que hizo Vladimir Putin a Bielorrusia. Y, bueno, ambos han negado que se esté produciendo ningún tipo de tensión sobre Moldavia. En todo caso, no deja de ser significativo que en esta mesa redonda, junto al secretario general de la OTAN, junto a Jens Stoltenberg, además de estar el presidente de Finlandia o la presidenta de Dinamarca, o la primera ministra de Dinamarca, disculpen, quien esté también sea la presidenta de Moldavia, Maja Sandu. Vamos a ver qué sale de ahí. Están preparando esa mesa redonda y enseguida también les podemos dar también una serie de cuestiones, les podemos explicar lo que van a decir al respecto. Bueno, pues parece que estamos ya a punto de volver precisamente de esa pausa en la organización de la Conferencia de Múnich. Ahí lo tienen. Va a comenzar ya esa mesa, esa charla entre, Jens Stoltenberg, el presidente de la OTAN, secretario general de la OTAN, Maja Sandu, presidenta de la República de Moldavia, presidente de la República de Finlandia, Sauli Niinisto, y Mette Frederiksen, la primera ministra de Dinamarca. Los cuatro, moderados por Heather Conley, están comenzando ya esa charla. Vamos a ver qué dicen. Importante, lo decíamos antes justo de esta parada. Por cierto, alguno preguntáis si a las 12 vamos a dar también a Christine Lagarde. Efectivamente, también daremos a Christine Lagarde. Estará por aquí también José Antonio Wittner para que analicemos lo que está ocurriendo con ese Banco Central Europeo. Eso será, insisto, en algo menos de 25 minutos. Antes tenemos esta rueda de prensa, esta suerte de mesa redonda, aunque algunos hagáis la broma con ello, con Jens Stoltenberg, con Maja Sandu, con Mette Frederiksen y con Sauli Niinisto, es decir, con Finlandia, con Moldavia, con Dinamarca y con la OTAN, los cuatro allí en unas decisiones importantes las que se pueden tomar. Primero porque es verdad que Dinamarca está menos en este foco, pero Finlandia tiene la necesidad y la querencia de entrar en la OTAN. Ha dicho hace apenas unos minutos su primera ministra, Sanna Marin, que quieren entrar, que es urgente y que además es un gesto de paz, ha dicho, que Finlandia entre en la OTAN, pero que no lo harán sin Suecia, que tienen que entrar a la vez y que es algo que se tiene que producir en el mismo momento, que no tienen que ser dos entradas distintas, sino que deben producirse a la vez. En un gesto hacia Suecia, a quien Turquía ha dicho que sí que vetaría su entrada en la OTAN, por una serie de gestos que consideraron ofensivos contra el mundo árabe. En este sentido, hay que ver qué dice la OTAN, ahí está Jens Stoltenberg, hay que ver qué le dice a Finlandia, cuyo presidente está precisamente sentándose también en esas sillas que ven ahí, y hay que ver qué se le dice a Moldavia. Insisto, Dinamarca está un poco más alejado de toda esta polémica, pero a Moldavia también habrá que decirle algo porque Maja Sandu se ha quejado de injerencias rusas y ha asegurado que tiene miedo de que se termine produciendo una invasión rusa de Moldavia, aunque Rusia evidentemente ha negado todas estas cuestiones, además de inmediato, pero ha dicho todo esto y en ese escenario, nada menos que Maja Sandu ha sido invitada precisamente a esta charla. Vamos precisamente hasta allí, como ven en pantalla, habla ya Jens Stoltenberg.
Aggression for several years, and NATO allies shared precise intelligence about Moscow's plans for an invasion long in advance. Over many months, we made every effort to engage Russia in diplomacy. And just days before, on this very stage in Munich, I called on President Putin to step back from the brink. But despite our calls for peace, he chose to attack. We can already draw some important lessons from the war. First, we must sustain and step up our support to Ukraine. Putin is not planning for peace. He is planning for more war, new offensives. And there are no indications he has changed his ambitions. He is mobilizing hundreds of thousands of troops, increasingly putting the Russian economy on a war footing, and reaching out to other authoritarian regimes such as Iran and North Korea to get more weapons. So we must give Ukraine what they need to win and prevail as a sovereign, independent nation in Europe. Some worry that our support to Ukraine risks triggering escalation. Let me be clear. There are no risk-free options, but the biggest risk of all is if Putin wins. If Putin wins in Ukraine, the message to him and other authoritarian leaders will be that they can use force to get what they want. This will make the world more dangerous and us more vulnerable. So supporting Ukraine is not only the morally right thing to do, it is also in our own security interest. The second lesson is that we need to continue to strengthen our deterrence and defense. Wars are unpredictable, and we do not know when or how this one will end. But I do know this: even if the war ends tomorrow, our security environment has changed for the long term. There is no going back. Kremlin wants a different Europe, one where Russia controls neighbors. We also know that Beijing is watching closely to see the price Russia pays or the reward it receives for its aggression. What is happening in Europe today could happen in Asia tomorrow. So the war in Ukraine demonstrates that security is not regional, it is global. In this new and more contested world, we can no longer afford to treat defense as optional. It is a necessity. Yes, spending more on defense means less money for other important tasks, but nothing is more important than our security, to preserve peace. The third lesson is that we need to strengthen the resilience of our societies. Military forces are necessary to protect our security, but they are not sufficient. We must also secure our cyberspace, our supply chains, and our infrastructure. The war in Ukraine has made clear the danger of over-reliance on authoritarian regimes. Not so long ago, many argued that importing Russian gas was purely an economic issue. It is not. It is a political issue. It is about our security. Because Europe's dependency on Russian gas made us vulnerable. So we should not make the same mistakes with China and other authoritarian regimes. We must not become too dependent on products and raw materials we import, avoid exporting key technologies that could be used against us, and protect our critical infrastructure at home. Of course, we should continue to trade and engage economically with China, but our economies and our economic interests cannot outweigh our security interests. So it's only right that we protect ourselves. But in doing so, we must remember that trade among friends and allies makes us stronger and more resilient. We must not create new barriers between free and open economies. The most important lesson from the war in Ukraine is that North America and Europe must stand together. In a more dangerous world, we need our transatlantic alliance more than ever. Without NATO, there is no security in Europe. So this is not the time to look beyond the alliance. This is the time to strengthen and enlarge our alliance, to promote peace, protect our shared security, and defend a global system based on our values and international law. Thank you, and then I look forward to our conversation.
Bueno, después de el aplauso, vamos con un breve resumen de todo lo dicho por Jens Stoltenberg, que insisto, ahora se va a sentar en ese escenario junto a la presidenta de Moldavia, al presidente de Finlandia y a la primera ministra de Dinamarca. Jens Stoltenberg, que ha dejado algunas cosas muy curiosas. Lo primero, que el mayor riesgo de todos es que gane Vladimir Putin. Ese es el mayor riesgo para todos en Europa, ha dicho. Sobre la posibilidad de que se pueda depender energéticamente de otras cuestiones que no son el gas ruso. De hecho, lo que ha dicho Stoltenberg es que la dependencia del gas ruso en Europa se ha demostrado que ha hecho vulnerable a Europa y que ahora hay que mirar a otros sitios. Dice que, y esto es curioso, ¿no? Porque ha dicho que mirar a China está bien, que efectivamente puede ser una ayuda, pero que hay que reforzar los lazos y ha insistido mucho con nuestros viejos aliados. Ha hablado de Estados Unidos y ha hablado de que hoy más que nunca lo que hay no es que buscar otros lugares, sino reforzar la seguridad, reforzar los lazos y reforzar ese empeño en seguir adelante justo a nuestros aliados de siempre, ha dicho Jens Stoltenberg en referencia a Europa y a Estados Unidos, sobre todo respecto a esa dependencia energética. Y también un detalle curioso, ha hablado de que no solo es importante la seguridad y el armamento, sino que también ha hablado de que para que nuestros valores morales resistan, ha dicho, también es necesario que las sociedades se mantengan con esa resiliencia, con esa fuerza en estos tiempos. Una resiliencia que evidentemente Stoltenberg le atribuye al hecho de que tengamos una inflación como la tenemos absolutamente disparada, con los precios disparados, una crisis energética importante y aún así efectivamente las sociedades traten de aguantar. Mensaje para todos de Jens Stoltenberg, que continúa ahora hablando en lo que ya es esa charla. Como están viendo ahí, Stoltenberg, a su izquierda está la primera ministra danesa, después Maja Sandu, la presidenta de Moldavia, y al final, en la derecha del todo, junto a la moderadora, a quien tienen es al presidente, en este caso, de la República de Finlandia, a Sauli Niinistö. Vamos hasta allí y escuchamos lo que está diciendo ahora Jens Stoltenberg.
It started in 2014. And since 2014, we have implemented the biggest reinforcement of collective defense with more troops, higher readiness, presence in the eastern part of the alliance, new defense plans, and also increased defense spending. And when we meet in Vilnius this year, I'm absolutely certain that we will also reconfirm that message, both stronger partnership with our partners in the Asia-Pacific, support for Ukraine, but also how to strengthen our deterrence and defense.
Secretary General, I want one more question to you, and then I want to bring our other panelists into the conversation. So in 5 months, the allies will gather in Vilnius, an incredibly important summit. At the end of that summit, what does success look like for you and for the alliance?
Well, the success is about demonstrating the unwavering support for Ukraine, and I'm absolutely confident that that will be the case in Vilnius. It's about reiterating our commitment to strengthen our deterrence and defense, and it's about building the partnership with our Asia-Pacific partners, because security is not regional, security is global. But then there is one other thing that will mark success, and that is that we will enlarge the alliance. I really work hard and really hope that by the Vilnius summit we will have finalized the accession process, and we have Finland and Sweden as the two new members of our alliance.
Secretary General, that's the perfect segue.
Bueno, pues ahí tienen también algunas de las señas de identidad, mensajes lanzados directamente, entre otras muchas cosas, al presidente de Finlandia, que está ahí a su lado. Esperamos, le dicen, ¿qué consideraría un éxito a la hora de salir de esta cumbre de seguridad de Múnich? Y dice, bueno, el apoyo a Ucrania sea algo indiscutible, que la gente de la región, los países de la región se unan también por completo a la OTAN en esa ofensiva de seguridad y defensa de Ucrania, y, por supuesto, que Finlandia y Suecia se sumen como nuevos miembros de pleno derecho en la OTAN.
Help us understand where you think this regime is going. It's been under enormous stress, and you have some of the sharpest analytical thinking about Russia, and then I'm going to ask you that accession question, but I want to start there first.
Okay, thank you. I have heard said that the Russian regime is the same in the future, if not even more of the same. And we know what the same is here. So we haven't seen any major changes, except that maybe the leadership is more concentrated on Putin, and the amount of elite people around him is maybe reducing a bit. Those more from the business side are maybe far further away at the moment. We have to keep in mind that military is number one in Russian society, in their economy, in their industry, whatever. And I guess that they are measuring this situation all the time, the Ukrainian war, by their military success. And that's the only figure that really that they really care about. And that also explains that what is going on, and I'm afraid will continue.
More of the same, greater intensity. which moves us to the urgency of Finland and Sweden formally joining the alliance. So, Secretary General, I may be bringing you into this conversation as well, because I want to make sure I understand where we are in the process. You were just in Ankara visiting with senior Turkish officials. Obviously, the devastation of the earthquake is unimaginable. But we now have this challenge of a timeline to get to the Vilnius summit. So you were very clear, Secretary General, in Ankara, saying both Sweden and Finland are ready, and we want them to enter as soon as possible. But this suggests that, as our Turkish colleagues have suggested, that they are ready to approve Finland to enter. The Finnish parliament is making the preparations to do that. President, I need the clarity. We know we want Finland and Sweden to come together. That's the goal. But if we must, and if Turkey, and of course Hungary, ratifies the accession protocols, only for Finland, would Finland walk through that door by itself? And if so, Secretary General, what are the implications for that scenario?
Okay, our position is crystal clear. With Sweden, we have made an application expressing our will to join NATO. And that will is considered by member states. 28 of them have accepted us. Then to Turkey. It's in their hands. We have got messages, and you have to be quite keen when you hear messages from Turkey. They may change every now and then, but nevertheless, we have heard them saying also that in an increasing way that Finland, Finland meets criteria which they have put, which are a bit different from those criteria of NATO. But little by little, they have increased in expressing that they might ratify Finland and just Finland. And even we have heard some voices that if Finland is willing to this kind of separation. And our answer is very clear. We have expressed our will together with Sweden, and we don't react at all. We will not accept or demand any kind of separation. But still, situation is such that our applications are at the table in Ankara, and if Turkey decides that yes, they will answer yes to Finland, but not yet yes to Sweden, well, that would be quite a difficult situation. Our hands are in a way tied. We have applied for membership. Should we now say that, no, we cancel our application? No, that we can't simply do. So that's how it looks like. But I want to assure that we have done our part by applying together with Sweden. That's our will to become a member, and it's in Turkish hands to decide whether they want to have us.
Secretary General,
bueno, está siendo claro, parece que ahora sí se me oye. Decía Jorge Pérez del buen mute, sí, efectivamente, tenía silenciado el micrófono. Un breve resumen de lo que ha dicho Saúl Niinisto, el presidente de la República de Finlandia, respecto de su entrada en la OTAN. Quieren entrar, están haciendo las correctas aplicaciones para entrar en la OTAN, habla, por cierto, Jens Stoltenberg, breve resumen, pero no van a hacerlo sin Suecia. Hay que recordar que Turquía ha dicho que no tiene problema con la entrada en la OTAN de Finlandia, pero que sí lo tiene con Suecia porque allí un ultraderechista quemó el Corán delante de la embajada turca. Por cierto, que desde el 8 de febrero, lo digo también por puntualizarlo todo, ha prohibido el gobierno específicamente que eso vuelva a ocurrir. Vamos a ver qué pasa, pero no se han vuelto a dar este tipo de problemas. Es verdad que por esa quema del Corán, Turquía dice que ahí se ha producido una ofensa y que de momento no considera que esté reparada y por lo tanto no admitiría esa entrada de Suecia en la OTAN. Dice Niinisto, el presidente de esa República de Finlandia, que ellos no quieren entrar de forma en solitario en la OTAN, que han hecho una aplicación para entrar de forma conjunta con Suecia y que es precisamente lo que espera.
Urge all allies to finalize the ratification. But I also said that, of course, what matters is that both become members as soon as possible, not whether one become a member before the other. The most important is to get them both in as soon as possible. And I continue to work hard to ensure that they are members by the Vilnius summit. If I can just add one more thing, and that is that this means that it is a Turkish decision, because they have two protocols. And I urge Turkey to ratify both. But of course, if they ratify one, then Finland will be a member of the alliance. Last point is that we have to remember that Sweden and Finland are in a very much better place now than before they applied. It's not as if nothing has happened. They are now invitees, meaning that they're sitting at the NATO table. They participate in NATO meetings. They're more and more integrated in NATO military structures, defense planning, civilian and military activities. NATO has increased its presence in the area. Allies, United States and many other allies have issued assurances, security assurances as part of the accession process. So it's inconceivable that there will be any military threat against Finland or Sweden without NATO reacting. So yes, we need to finalize the process, but we've come a very long way already, both with Finland and Sweden.
Thank you to you both. This is essential and as we understand the next several weeks and months. So thank you. President Sandu, all leaders have tough weeks.
Le van a preguntar ahora precisamente a Maya Sandu, a la presidenta de Moldavia, qué piensa de todo esto, y vamos a ver cuáles son sus reflexiones también, porque es uno de esos focos importantes dentro de todo lo que está ocurriendo en Ucrania, especialmente con Rusia y Bielorrusia, que la propia Sandu ha dicho en varias ocasiones que se está produciendo esa entrada, ¿no?, por parte de miembros de Bielorrusia a Moldavia para desestabilizar. Respecto a la OTAN sobre Finlandia, por puntualizar lo que ha dicho Stoltenberg, dice que además ahora tanto Suecia como Finlandia están mejor preparados, ya han sido invitados, ya han mandado todo lo que tenían que mandar y también he hecho referencia a sus ejércitos y a la aportación que hacen en defensa y que han sido invitados también a hablar dentro de esa organización de naciones del Atlántico Norte, del Tratado del Atlántico Norte. Por cierto, el propio Jens Stoltenberg dice que efectivamente Turquía tiene ese derecho a veto, no lo niega y que puede hacer que pase uno y otro no. No es una cosa que dependa, como pueden ver, de Finlandia. Volvemos hasta allí con Maya Sandu, presidenta de Moldavia.
Enormous repercussions on every aspect of Moldova's security. It increased, including the military risk for Moldova. In the last few months, we saw 4 missiles crossing illegally our airspace. We have many cases of rocket debris falling on our territory. We see threats coming from different representatives of Russia, the recent one from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who indicated that Moldova might be the next in line. But as long as Ukraine keeps the Russian army far from our borders, we believe that there is not an imminent military threat to Moldova, and Ukraine keeps us safe. At the same time, Russia is already waging a hybrid war against Moldova, and we have many examples. In the fall, they tried to use the energy crisis, hoping that we will not be able to pay for the very high prices for gas and electricity. When they saw that the government managed to find the money, Gazprom cut gas supply by 60%, hoping that we will not find alternative sources and that the paid protests will overthrow the legally elected government. Now we've learned about a new plan that they might try to bring people from outside the country to organize these violent protests and then to force the authorities into negotiations on snap parliamentary elections. There are many elements of this hybrid war. Of course, the most damaging to our democracy is propaganda and the disinformation, but there are multiple cyber attacks. There are multiple false bomb alerts. And of course, all of this is meant to destabilize the society and to use the difficult economic situation that we face because of Russia's war in Ukraine to bring people into the streets and then to change the government and to bring a pro-Russian government that it could use also against Ukraine.
Thank you, President Sandu.
Bueno, importante detalle también, lo comentábamos, iba a pasar y está pasando. Sandu, lo primero que ha dicho la presidenta de la República de Moldavia es que efectivamente, bueno, que le preocupa mucho lo que está ocurriendo en Ucrania, evidentemente la invasión, las fronteras y todo lo que está ocurriendo dentro, que necesita una serie de ayudas y que ellos tienen también ciertas fronteras que sienten desprotegidas. Y aquí viene el kit de la cuestión de lo que ha dicho Maya Sandu. Rusia está implementando una guerra híbrida en Moldavia. Evidentemente, dicen, no sienten o no tienen la sensación de que se vaya a producir una invasión inminente de Moldavia, pero dice que sí que se está produciendo cierta desestabilización de los órganos de gobierno a través de ciertos grupos de presión. Lo que les veníamos contando, evidentemente, Maya Sandu, lo primero que ha hecho en su primera declaración en esa conferencia de Múnich es decírselo al resto del mundo, ya no solo a través de sus micrófonos, sino a través de esos micrófonos que le presta hoy Alemania. Volvemos hasta allí, volvemos con Maya Sandu.
Moldova, but this is also needed for the entire region. So we would like our partners to consider this type of assistance that we urgently need because of the internal threats of the hybrid war. We also need to support to develop our strategic intelligence capabilities to deal with the cyber threats. We need support to modernize our border security and control. We need support for special intervention focused capabilities. And I believe we need to work together and to be more efficient in tackling the Russian propaganda. It's extremely difficult for us to tackle this issue alone. I think we need to have common approaches on fighting the disinformation, the pro-war propaganda. I think we need to have common approaches in dealing with the social networks which are not responsive to Moldova's requests when it comes to the pro-war propaganda and to the disinformation. And I do believe that they can take us seriously when we approach them together. But this is a very big issue. And as I said, the propaganda, the disinformation is probably now the most damaging element for our society and for our democracy.
Well, and Moldova is very much a
Ahí lo
laboratory
tienen
right now
otra
of
vez,
that propaganda, so the alliance could
precisamente
learn an enormous
hablando
amount.
Maya Sandu de la propaganda y de los elementos de desestabilización que llegan desde el entorno de Rusia, dice que atraviesan Bielorrusia y que se están introduciendo en Moldavia precisamente para hacer daño, para crear una situación previa a lo que ella considera que es el derrocamiento de su gobierno. Lo ha dicho en varias ocasiones, hoy no ha hablado con esa claridad de un derrocamiento del gobierno, pero sí que ha dicho claramente que se está produciendo esa labor de propaganda, de guerra híbrida por parte de Rusia y que lo que quieren es desestabilizar Moldavia por completo, por dónde está y por la situación que tiene para con Ucrania y esas fronteras al estar pegado a territorio, bueno, ruso o prorruso. Moldavia, por cierto, que lo que acaba de pedir también es ayuda para modernizar precisamente las fronteras para que pueda también atender con seguridad a todo lo que está ocurriendo allí y hacer frente a esa guerra híbrida, poder luchar contra esa guerra híbrida que dice que se está produciendo allí. Maya Sandu, insisto, aprovechando bien los minutos que le da Alemania, que le da esta Conferencia de Seguridad de Múnich. Volvemos hasta allí. Ahora, Mette Frederiksen, la primera ministra de Dinamarca.
Moldova is a small, it's a poor, and it's a fragile European country. You can be next in line when we're talking about Russia. And you are standing up, you as a person, for democracy, rule of law, and anti-corruption. So you are a brave European leader. And of course, all our awareness is about Ukraine. I totally agree with you, Jens. We have to do more, and we have to do it faster. But at the same time, let us not forget Moldova, Georgia, and other neighboring countries. So when you ask me what are the next thing to do, we have to, and we need to spend more on our defense. Of course, that's number one. We have to do as much as we can to support Ukraine with weapons, more donations, and we have to do it faster. I think we have to work more closely together in Europe to keep up producing, because it is extremely important to donate more and to do it faster, but also to be able to defend ourselves. But we also have to build much stronger partnerships. And of course, Moldova is a great example of this, but also when it comes to the Global South. Because we focus on Ukraine, that is extremely important, but at the same time, I mean, what is going on in Africa? What's going on in the Sahel region? If we are not able as European countries to build strong alliances in Asia, of course, transatlantic is where it starts and where it begins and where it ends, I totally agree. But if we are not able to build stronger alliances with India, with our partners in Asia, as you said, Jens, in Africa, in other places of the world, we will lose, I think, the global war on values. So we have to do a lot of things at the same time, and we have to, I think, be aware that all the crises we are facing are interfering with each other. So, of course, being able to help Ukraine, and we have to win this war, and they will never be able to win it on their own. We have to win it with them. We have to build a stronger European Union. We have to build stronger partnerships with our neighbors, but we have to be much more active on the global scene at the same time.
Bueno, Mette Frederiksen, la primera ministra de Dinamarca, lo primero que ha hecho, que se ha llevado, por cierto, una ovación, es alabar, dice, el valor de Maia Sandu, que dirigiendo un país como Moldavia, dice, más pequeño, pegado a Rusia y con mucho que perder, tiene el valor, dice, de enfrentarse a ello y de decir a las claras que está siendo objeto de esa guerra híbrida y que la propaganda rusa está intentando desestabilizar a su gobierno precisamente por estar donde está y por el apoyo que están intentando y brindando a Ucrania durante estos últimos meses. También destaca la primera ministra de Dinamarca una cosa importante, dice que da por hecho y da por sentada las negociaciones y las alianzas que se tienen siempre con los países miembros del otro lado del Atlántico. Habla de Estados Unidos, habla también de la buena sintonía con Reino Unido a pesar de la salida del Brexit, etcétera, pero dice que hay que afianzar las relaciones internacionales más allá de las clásicas, que hay que hablar con India, que hay que hablar con África y que hay que hablar con China, y que en este sentido es donde van a encontrar nuevos aliados, que hay que reforzarlos para precisamente, habla de los valores de la Unión Europea, de que esa unión salga más reforzada y que mediante esas nuevas negociaciones con, insisto, India, con África, particularmente Sudáfrica, China, etcétera, pues logren, dice, transmitir y perseverar en esos valores que son los que, dice, tienen que vencer en Ucrania, una Ucrania a la que hay que seguir dando apoyo militar y también ayuda, y la propia Mette Frederiksen se ha dirigido en cierta medida a los ucranianos diciendo que no se les va a dejar de apoyar en ningún momento y que estará Europa a su lado hasta que definitivamente ganen esta guerra. Volvemos hasta allí, volvemos con la primera ministra danesa.
Our common table. My guess is that we will see a more fragile situation in the High North as well. We are seeing more and more Russian activities. And of course, because of climate change, the High North will change in many different aspects. So we need more awareness, and we need to be physically much more in the High North. You are right, the to-do list is quite long, and I have now made it even longer. But that's how it is to be a leader in these years. I mean, so thank you for putting the High North, and of course, Finland and Sweden being NATO members, hopefully soon, will also be very important when it comes to the Arctic region, and it is becoming more and more fragile as well.
Absolutely. President Nister, you want to come in?
Yes, I see two elements. First, the security point of view. I fully agree with Mette, what she said. Actually, tradition has been that Arctic Council doesn't take any opinion on security issues. And, well, We see at the same time that the high north, the tensions are growing all the time, and the interest towards that is not only limited to Arctic Council countries. For example, UK is also strongly involved in security issues. But there's also another element that is the environmental one. We have to keep in mind that Russia covers half of the Arctic. And I have often said that if we lose the Arctic because of climate change, we lose the globe. And there we have to be capable of somehow trying at least to cooperate or let Russians understand, put them understand that the question is very crucial. Their houses are collapsing in tundra area where the ice is melting. So they have to realize that it's a common problem too. But back to security issues, that is an increasing issue, and I believe that NATO is taking more and more notice to that too. So it's historic that we have 2 new NATO members in Arctic Council, in next Arctic Council meeting maybe. Hope so.
Exactly. So I'm going to bring the audience into this important conversation, but I'm going to ask each of you to help with a question that many in the content
va a dar
community
ya la
are
palabra
wrestling.
tiene algunas preguntas. Introducía el presidente de Finlandia una cuestión importante también en todo este detalle, de la que se habla poco. Sobre la seguridad decía que evidentemente es importante reforzarla, ir de la mano y conservar los aliados y efectivamente buscar más allá de las fronteras, pero ha introducido, decía, una cosa importante que tiene que ver con el cambio climático. Hablaba de que con todo esto y preocupados simplemente del petróleo y de lo que está ocurriendo ahora con Ucrania, estamos perdiendo de vista el deshielo en el Ártico, y habla de que están teniendo un problema grave con ese deshielo en algunos hogares, en concreto en Finlandia, por cómo llega, y que es un problema que también tiene Rusia y es un problema que hay que preservar, sobre todo por encima de esa necesidad energética, que es donde hay que buscar nuevas fuerzas. Bueno, se desliza un poquito fuera del arco habitual que está llevando esta conferencia de Múnich, pero viene a traer una cuestión que es importante y que hasta hace poquito, de hecho, era el foco central de todas estas reuniones. Por más que ahora, con la guerra de Ucrania, la crisis energética y la inflación disparada, todos estos objetivos de cambio climático se hayan ido, bueno, desplazando hacia adelante unos años, ¿no? Y ya no sea importante que los vehículos sean eléctricos en 2030, sino en 2035 y todo lo demás, ¿no? Por las necesidades que ya se sabe que van cambiando. Vamos de nuevo hasta allí, vamos con Jens Stoltenberg, secretario general de la OTAN.
Prime Minister, shifting north and east with Sweden and Finland, do you feel that sense of shift of gravity from the war?
No, I agree with Jens. Of course, we need to be aware of the current situation. So we have supported, all the decisions that has been taken when it comes to the eastern flank, and probably we will have to stay there for a period of time. But I think what is so important about NATO is that NATO is flexible in its way of thinking, in our way of thinking. So, of course, now the situation is about Ukraine and, unfortunately, maybe also other neighboring countries. But at the same time, we are able to work with the cyber hybrid situation. And as I said before, I think we need more focus in the south because of the very, very difficult situation, especially in Sahel region. But I think the most important thing is that we are flexible in our way of thinking, and we are able, as NATO, to move very fast when something occurs in front of us.
President Sandu, do you feel that shift to the east?
I do believe that because of this war, my country is now already part of Europe's security belt. We have been helping with the refugees, with the solidarity lanes, and we are trying to become a provider of security. We need help to become a more serious provider of security for the region.
President Nistu?
Well, I think it's quite natural that we are now a bit eastwards because of the Ukrainian war. But I would also point out a certain kind of flexibility. surely we have to be prepared to react wherever there's a problem. And north, yes, Arctic area, Russian border, yes, Black Sea, maybe even Mediterranean. So to be ready to react to whatever, that's the lesson, I guess, we have got during the past year.
So the answer to the think tanks is the center of gravity is flexibility and being where we need to be. All right, we have some great questions coming forward. And let me turn the microphone.
He hecho una especie de mini resumen, cada uno de sus pretensiones. La cara de la presidenta de Moldavia, de la señora Sandu, cuando hablaba el presidente de Finlandia y decía debemos de estar preparados para actuar en todas partes, era un poema, en todo caso, porque sí que es verdad que más allá de algunos comentarios que estáis trasladando a través del chat, algunos de vosotros, es verdad que Sandu sí parece reflejar ese cierto miedo a la caída de su gobierno y a que esa guerra híbrida que ha llamado desestabilice por completo a Moldavia. Dice que ellos están jugando un papel importante como cinturón de seguridad de Europa y que en ese sentido están acogiendo refugiados, están distribuyendo mucha o gran parte de la ayuda humanitaria que llega, etcétera, etcétera, y que eso es algo que quieren desestabilizar e impedir y que en ese sentido tienen ese temor que hay que proteger, también necesitan ayuda, sobre todo en el apartado de seguridad, algo que la primera ministra danesa parece ofrecerle sin ningún problema y algo que Jens Stoltenberg, o para lo que Jens Stoltenberg, el secretario general de la OTAN, también asiente. No sé si porque lo da por hecho o cuál es la cuestión. En todo caso, vamos hasta allí. De nuevo, responden ahora las preguntas de la audiencia.
We agreed back in 2008 that Ukraine will become a member of the alliance, and that is still our position. Then, of course, what matters now is to ensure that Ukraine prevails as a sovereign independent state, because without having Ukraine as a sovereign independent state, there's no way to discuss any kind of relationship between NATO and Ukraine in the future. So the urgent need is to provide military support, as NATO allies and partners are doing every day. In that context, I also welcome the initiative from Prime Minister Sunak to actually have a discussion about the framework we need to ensure an enduring peace after this war ends. Because when the war ends, we need to make sure that history doesn't repeat itself, that Russia doesn't continue to invade Ukraine, because this is a pattern. It started in 2008 with the invasion of Georgia, then in 2014 Crimea and Donbass, and then in last year the full-fledged invasion of Ukraine. And we cannot allow Russia to continue to chip away European security, and we need to break the circle of Russian aggression against the European countries. And therefore we need, when this war ends, to establish some kind of framework that ensures that Russia's aggression doesn't continue.
President Sandu.
Yes, looking at what Russia does to Ukraine today, it's clear that neutrality cannot defend us. Neutrality can defend only when the other countries respect it. But you know that today there is no popular support, enough popular support to change that. And we know that, we understand that, and we acknowledge the situation. We can discuss why is that, and I think the Russian propaganda is to a big extent to be blamed for that. For instance, today, one of the lines of the Russian propaganda is that neutrality means that the country should not strengthen its defense sector, which doesn't make any sense. But unfortunately, there are many people in Moldova who are scared of the war, and they buy this kind of propaganda. So that's why I thought that we need to work together to deal with this, to counter this propaganda. But given the situation, as I said, there is no question now about changing the neutrality, but definitely Moldova should be helped to strengthen its defense sector, and Moldova should be part of the new European security architecture.
Thank you so much. I see back there, Tobias Elwood.
Bueno, un detalle importante de Maya Sandu, de la presidenta de Moldavia, que es quizá quien más claro lo tiene de todos los que están ahí, o quien menos tapujos o menos cuestiones tiene que esconder, no tiene que hilar fino. Dice Sandu que la neutralidad no es algo posible cuando ya hay una guerra, porque la otra parte no respeta esa neutralidad. Entonces hay que elegir bando. que ellos lo tienen claro y en ese sentido se ve cuando reciben a los refugiados ucranianos, cuando también envían la ayuda humanitaria, cuando montan hospitales precisamente para esos refugiados que están llegando o tratan de implementar nuevos lugares, campamentos de refugiados o incluso casas donde alojar a toda esta gente, ¿no? Ella dice que pertenecen ahora a un cinturón de seguridad de la Unión Europea, que lo tiene claro y que sabe qué posición está defendiendo, que ella sabe que no son neutrales, pero es que no cree que se pueda ser neutral. Maya Sandu, que también dice que precisamente por todo esto hay que tener en cuenta quiénes son los aliados y defenderlos. Y defender, en este caso, Moldavia, de lo que ha denominado, y no deja de hacerlo en cada respuesta, la propaganda rusa que trata de desestabilizar a su gobierno.
But Moldova clearly could be next. What more can we do internationally? What more can NATO do? What more can the Joint Expeditionary Force do to support Moldova now before it's too late?
Prime Minister Ferguson, I want to turn that question to you as you were thinking, what can we do? And then Secretary General, if you have some thoughts on that as well.
Should I start? Oh. Okay. I think Jens can answer when it comes to what we can do in the NATO frame, but I would like to add what we can do politically. Because what you said, Maya, is very important, that you have a big minority of your population that actually supports Russia because of fake news and the war Russia is into when it comes to the medias and so on. And we can only, as leaders, we can only support Ukraine and Moldova if we have the support of our populations, because we are democracies. And when we are delivering, like Denmark, our whole artillery to Ukraine, it demands support from our populations. So I think fighting inflation, working with Moldova when it comes to energy, you are not producing any energy on your own. And I think you told me that the prices of gas has been seven doubled in a very, very poor European country. So, I mean, if you are an ordinary family in Moldova facing that your bills have been seven doubled, you could maybe feel then it would be better to have Russia to help us or to be a part of our daily life. So, I mean, bringing economic development into our partner countries and never to forget the global south. I really wanted this perspective because, I mean, the food crisis and the energy crisis is working against us when it comes to the situation in Ukraine. So, of course, there's something we can do when it comes to protect Moldova. But at the same time, we need to help to develop Moldova to make sure that the population supports the European perspective, both when it comes to NATO and when it comes to the European Union. I think this is at least as important as the hard measures that I guess Jens will talk about as well.
So first of all, I agree fully with
la primera ministra de Dinamarca tiene claro que lo que dice es que hay que ayudar a Moldavia, entre otras muchas cosas porque es un país muy pequeño que se está enfrentando a Rusia, a su propaganda, a las fake news, ha dicho, y que de eso hay que proteger a los distintos pueblos que están echando una mano y que claramente se identifica con los valores democráticos de Europa. En este sentido, dice Fredriksen que hay que ayudar a Moldavia, que Moldavia está pagando unas facturas. Dice, imaginen cómo enfrenta un país pequeño, con una población pequeña, que de repente recibe tantos refugiados y que tiene que hacer frente a tanta ayuda humanitaria, cómo enfrenta unas facturas de gas terriblemente altas. Y esto es lo que está viviendo Moldavia y por eso también hay que ayudar a Moldavia. Vamos con Stoltenberg.
The main reason why Ukraine has been able to repel and to push back the Russian forces is, of course, the bravery, the courage of the Ukrainian armed forces, the political leadership, the people of Ukraine. But one important element has also been the fact that NATO allies actually trained and helped Ukraine since 2014. The United Kingdom, the United States, Canada, and others provided significant training and capacity building and also equipment from 2014, meaning that the Ukrainian army were much stronger, better equipped, better trained, better led last year than they were in 2014, and that's at least part of the explanation why they were able to withstand the Russian invasion now in a way they were not able to do in 2014. So we are working on our partnership. We agreed at the NATO summit to step up the partnership and support for Ukraine. But I urge NATO allies to do more because it is an urgent need to support those partners who are vulnerable for Russian aggression.
Secretary General, thank you so much. This has been such an important conversation about making sure that Finland and Sweden, full members in NATO, more support for Moldova, 100%. And I think Tobias's words are absolutely clear. The to-do list is massive, but historical times require historical decisions. My last 1-second question to you, Secretary General. American presidents have a tradition of writing a letter to their successor with their words of wisdom. At some point, we're going to choose your successor. What words of wisdom in 30 seconds would you give your successor?
So keep Europe and North America together. And I don't believe in Europe alone. I don't believe in North America alone. I believe in North America and Europe together, and that's NATO.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Bueno,
Thank you.
No sé si es gracioso, pero es la forma de terminar. Dice que no cree en un Estados Unidos solitario, no cree en un Reino Unido solitario, no cree en una Europa en solitaria, que él lo que cree es que cree en el conjunto de todos estos y en la unión de todas estas cuestiones. Bueno, hasta aquí, de momento, este ratito, estas intervenciones, perdón, no interferencias, intervenciones de Jens Stoltenberg, de Nata Fredriksen, de Niili, desde Finlandia, o de Maja Sandu, desde la presidencia de Moldavia. Insistimos, unas intervenciones curiosas en tanto que Finlandia persigue entrar en la OTAN. Parece que lo tiene hecho, que lo tiene claro y que incluso por las palabras del propio Stoltenberg en estas intervenciones, parece claro que Turquía va a apoyar la entrada de Finlandia dentro de la OTAN. El problema lo tienen con Suecia, que tras la quema por parte de un ultraderechista de un Corán delante de la embajada de Turquía, pues Turquía no tiene claro que quiere apoyar ahora la entrada de Suecia en la OTAN. Dice Finlandia que es una decisión que hay que tomar de forma conjunta. Vamos a ver qué ocurre cuando Turquía tenga que afrontar esta decisión y si le han convencido de lo contrario. Pero sería también una forma de protegerse y de proteger las fronteras energéticas de Suecia y Finlandia, particularmente frente a Rusia en ese Mar del Norte, que es también parte de lo que están buscando. Importante dentro de todo lo que ha ocurrido aquí en estas intervenciones, pues una Maja Sandu que ha venido a prácticamente pedir también ayuda directamente a la OTAN y a Europa, porque dice que son el cinturón de seguridad en Moldavia de Europa y que no se sienten totalmente respaldados, que les hace falta que llegue más ayuda porque lo que sí está llegando, dicen, son las fake news, las noticias falsas y la propaganda de Rusia a través de Bielorrusia. Bueno, detalles importantes los que ha ido dejando Maja Sandu, que con una población pequeña ha visto también cómo la primera ministra de Dinamarca le defendía, diciendo que efectivamente con esa población pequeña hacen frente a un gasto extraordinario ahora en energía porque dependían mucho de que Rusia pues les diera esa energía y ahora, al no tenerlo, pues lo que tienen es un problema gordo, igual que en realidad tiene una crisis energética toda Europa, pero claro, en Moldavia, una región pequeña, sin posibilidad de autoabastecerse y con esa necesidad importantísima que tenía de Rusia, a quien tenía en este sentido como un aliado estratégico fundamental para sus intereses energéticos, bueno, pues sin eso, ahora lo que tienen son unas facturas tremendas que las familias en Moldavia tienen que abonar. Vamos a dejarles con la siguiente conferencia, que va a ser, no se lo pierdan, con Kamala Harris, la vicepresidenta de los Estados Unidos. Y esa va a ser la única intervención, pues si se están preguntando si hay intervenciones de Joe Biden, etcétera, no las hay en el día de hoy, va a ser la intervención que haga Estados Unidos. Aprovechamos también para poner en contexto lo que vaya a ocurrir con Estados Unidos, sobre todo porque hace apenas unos instantes hemos visto a Wang Yi desde la Secretaría de Exteriores de China, bueno, pues contando que esto del globo es algo que no va a aceptar China, lo de la destrucción de ese globo y que lo tilden de espía. Ha asegurado Wang Yi que esto no era un globo espía, por más que le haya dado vueltas, entre otros, John Kirby, el secretario del Consejo Nacional de Seguridad de los Estados Unidos, que en varias ruedas de prensa ya ha dicho desde la Casa Blanca que era un globo espía, que no tiene duda ninguna, que el FBI lo está analizando, pero que no hay duda. Bueno, pues en este sentido vamos a ver, porque China lo ha negado, evidentemente, y ha dicho que además no han cumplido los estadounidenses con lo que se suele hacer con estos globos, que es avisar al país al que pertenece y devolvérselo, poco más o menos. Que han hecho una demostración de fuerza, una desmesurada demostración de fuerza, ha dicho Wang Yi hace un ratito. Así que vamos a ver qué dice Kamala Harris en el día de hoy y si responde a esto o no. Seguro que es una de las cuestiones que le lanzarán desde la audiencia, al menos, si es que no lo hace ella desde el propio atril o si es que no interviene. No creo que diga nada de los ovnis. Lo que insistirá, y mucho, además, seguramente Kamala Harris, es en lo que viene comentando en realidad todo el gabinete del presidente Joe Biden estos días, que es que hay que seguir apoyando a Ucrania, pase lo que pase, tanto con efectivos como con armamento y munición. Ayer deslizaban una pregunta importante dentro de la rueda de prensa que da la Casa Blanca al propio John Kirby, a quien les mencionaba yo, al director del Consejo Nacional de Seguridad de Estados Unidos. Le decían, oiga, pero hay un problema con el techo de gasto, con el déficit estadounidense que ustedes ahora mismo tienen congelado y por lo tanto no pueden seguir airadamente y con esa discreción soltando dinero. Hay que recordar que cada vez que Joe Biden y Volodymyr Zelensky, el presidente de Ucrania, se reúnen o hablan por teléfono, etcétera, Joe Biden y en general la administración americana desbloquea un paquete que al margen de armamento y municiones tiene otros 2.000 millones de dólares sobre la mesa. Claro, ahora, con todo esto frenado y con Janet Yellen, la secretaria del Tesoro, haciendo pues encaje de bolillos y malabarismos para llegar hasta el 19 de junio sin hacer impagos, porque tienen ese techo, insisto, de deuda, el techo de déficit congelado ahora mismo, no de deuda, el techo de déficit, aunque viene a ser lo mismo, pues no pueden emitirla, pero bueno, el déficit lo tienen congelado, no pueden volver a gastar por encima de lo que ya tienen, a menos que lleguen a un acuerdo con los republicanos. De momento no hay acuerdo y, claro, sin esos acuerdos, ¿de dónde va a salir el dinero para seguir pagando lo de Ucrania? Le dijeron ayer a John Kirby, la respuesta de Kirby fue, habrá dinero y nadie, ni dentro ni fuera de la propia Casa Blanca, ni en demócratas ni en republicanos, está poniendo en cuestión esas ayudas que hay que mandarle precisamente a Ucrania. Vamos a ver si va en esa misma línea Kamala Harris, la vicepresidenta de los Estados Unidos, o no. Una Kamala Harris, por cierto, y esto entre que sale y no, aprovecho para deslizárselo yo, hay que tener en cuenta que esperaba ser la próxima candidata demócrata, según su propio entorno, y es algo que no va a ocurrir porque ya saben que Joe Biden ha anunciado que se presentará en 2024. Así que bueno, vamos a ver qué ocurre y qué dice la propia vicepresidenta de los Estados Unidos. Nos desplazamos hasta allí y con ello ya les dejamos.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The session will start in an instant. We won't continue with the program until you sit down, so please take your seats now.
German, please. Huh?
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated or take your seats now so we can continue with the program. Ladies and gentlemen, the session will begin momentarily, and so you will need to sit down, otherwise this won't get going.
Bitte nicht hier stehen bleiben.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin. Please take your seats now. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the chairman of the Munich Security Conference, Ambassador Christoph Heusgen.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's now my pleasure and honor to welcome the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. We are continuing our tradition that the US is represented at the Munich Security Conference by the Vice President, something that President Biden started in 2009. And we are very happy that you continue this. We have a fantastic transatlantic delegation here. The only difference Mrs. Vice Presidents, when we started 59 years ago, there were only men, and now there is a woman Vice President. Welcome, Vice President.
Thank you, Christoph. Thank you, Christoph. Thank you. Well, it is my honor to be back at the Munich Security Conference. As many of us remember, last year on this stage, I warned of the imminent invasion of Ukraine by Russia. And let us all recall, many at the time wondered how we would all respond. Many wondered, could Russia be stopped? Would NATO come together? Would NATO break apart? And would Ukraine be prepared? Colleagues, today, a year later, we know Kyiv is still standing. Russia is weakened. The transatlantic alliance is stronger than ever. And most importantly, the spirit of the Ukrainian people endures. And under Joe Biden, President of the United States, our country has demonstrated decisive leadership. As President Biden often says, the United States will support Ukraine for as long as it takes. We will not waver. And today, at this Munich Security Conference, I will then describe what we all continue to have at stake: the moral interest, the strategic interest, and the reason Ukraine matters for the people of America, for the people of Europe, and for people around the world. First, from the starting days of this unprovoked war, we have witnessed Russian forces engage in horrendous atrocities and war crimes. Their actions are an assault on our common values, an attack on our common humanity. And let us be clear, Russian forces have pursued a widespread and systemic attack against a civilian population. Gruesome acts of murder, torture, rape, and deportation, execution-style killings, beatings, and electrocution. Russian authorities have forcibly deported hundreds of thousands of people from Ukraine to Russia, including children. They have cruelly separated children from their families. And we've all seen the images of the theater in Mariupol, where hundreds of people were killed. Think of the image of the pregnant mother who was killed following a strike at a maternity hospital where she was preparing to give birth. Think of the images of Bucha, civilians shot in cold blood, their bodies left in the street. The jarring photograph of the man who was riding his bike. Think of the 4-year-old girl who the United Nations recently reported was sexually assaulted by a Russian soldier, a 4-year-old child. Barbaric and inhumane. Long before I was Vice President of the United States, I spent the majority of my career as a prosecutor, beginning as a young lawyer in the courtroom and later running the California Department of Justice. I know firsthand the importance of gathering facts and holding them up against the law. In the case of Russia's actions in Ukraine, we have examined the evidence. We know the legal standards. And there is no doubt these are crimes against humanity. The United States has formally determined that Russia has committed crimes against humanity. And I say to all those who have perpetrated these crimes and to their superiors who are complicit in these crimes, you will be held to account. In the face of these indisputable facts, to all of us here in Munich, let us renew our commitment to accountability. Let us renew our commitment to the rule of law. As for the United States, we will continue to support the judicial process in Ukraine and international investigations, because justice must be served. Let us all agree, on behalf of all the victims, both known and unknown, justice must be served. Such is our moral interest. We also have a significant strategic interest. The fight in Ukraine has far-reaching global ramifications. No nation is safe in a world where one country can violate the sovereignty and territorial integrity of another. Where crimes against humanity are committed with impunity, where a country with imperialist ambitions can go unchecked. Our response to the Russian invasion is a demonstration of our collective commitment to uphold international rules and norms. Rules and norms which, since the end of World War II, have provided unprecedented security and prosperity, not only for the American people, not only for the people of Europe, but people around the world. Principles that state that sovereign nations have a right to peacefully exist, that borders must not be changed by force, that there are inalienable human rights which governments must respect, and that the rule of law must be preserved. Indeed, this moment has tested our willingness to defend and uphold these rules and norms. And we have remained strong. And we must stay strong. Because if Putin were to succeed with his attack on these fundamental principles, other nations could feel emboldened to follow his violent example. Other authoritarian powers could seek to bend the world to their will through coercion, disinformation, and even brute force. The international order upon which we all rely could be at risk. So in the interest of global security and prosperity, one of our defining missions is to uphold international rules-based order. And nations around the world agree. Consider, more than 140 countries voted at the United Nations to condemn Russia's aggression and to support Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity in defense of the core principles of the UN Charter. Of course, we have also seen nations like North Korea and Iran send weapons in support of Russia's brutal war. We are also troubled that Beijing has deepened its relationship with Moscow since the war began. Looking ahead, any steps by China to provide lethal support to Russia would only reward aggression, continue the killing, and further undermine a rules-based order. Again, the United States will continue to strongly support Ukraine, and we will do so for as long as it takes. The American people, you see, are in awe of the resolve of the people of Ukraine, in awe of their resilience and righteousness, their willingness to fight for freedom and liberty, and the extraordinary tenacity and leadership of President Zelensky. In fact, joining me in Munich are distinguished members of the United States Congress, Republicans and Democrats, members of the House of Representatives and the United States Senate. And they are here together because they understand the stakes. The leadership of these members has been vital to America's support of Ukraine. And President Biden and I know that their support for Ukraine will continue. We also know Ukraine will continue to be supported by a united transatlantic community. So Putin thought he could divide NATO. Remember where we were a year ago. In this, he has failed. The NATO alliance is stronger now than ever before. And the United States' commitment to NATO and to its Article 5 is ironclad. Just look at our track record over the past year. Just look at our multilateral cooperation. Together, we have provided historic assistance to Ukraine. Together, we have dealt Russia a strategic failure. Together, we have imposed unprecedented costs on Russia. And together, we have pursued energy security and reinvested in our collective defense. And we have come together to stand for our common values and our common interests and our common humanity. I have no doubt that this unity will endure. I also have no illusions about the path forward. There will be more dark days in Ukraine. The daily agony of war will persist. The global ripple effects will continue to be felt by countries near and far, from Africa to Southeast Asia to the Caribbean. But if Putin thinks he can wait us out, he is badly mistaken. Time is not on his side. To be sure, Ukrainians will continue to be tried and tested, just as they have been over this past year. Transatlantic unity will continue to be tried and tested. And I am certain that Ukraine will rise to the task, that the United States and Europe will rise to the task. So my last point, America will continue our leadership in defense of human dignity, in defense of rules and norms, and in defense of freedom and liberty. There is too much at stake to do anything less. Americans know well the meaning of independence. We believe in the fundamental importance of sovereignty and rule of law. And we will always stand on the side of justice. Colleagues, I do believe we all know, when future generations look back at this moment, they will see that we understood the task before us and rose to this occasion. And so to you I say, the United States of America is proud to be your partner in this noble pursuit. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. We go for him. Madam Vice President, thank you for this very, very strong speech, this commitment to transatlantic unity, this commitment to the support of Ukraine. And we have many, many representatives from Ukraine here in the room, and they certainly were reassured by what you have said. Let me ask you, you confirmed this US support, but we all know next year the United States will enter into an election campaign. We are in a democracy. We know which side of the aisle the result will be. How sure are you that, how certain are you that what you have said, that Putin, who wants to wait us out, that in the end he will not succeed?
Thank you, Christoph. As I said, I believe, and I believe the American people understand the stakes. And the stakes being our moral interest and our strategic interest. I will tell you, I travel around the United States, and I have seen the Ukrainian flag fly in places most of you have probably never heard of in the United States. In storefronts, in front of homes, people proudly wearing, Americans proudly wearing the colors of Ukraine. The American people are aware of the images of Bucha. The American people take great pride in a fight for independence, that being part of the foundation of our nation and our principles and values. I think about where the United States is going on this issue based on the track record of where we've been. You only have to look at where we were a year ago and where we are today in terms of the contributions and resources that America has put into everything from ammunition to artillery to air defense, from Stingers to Abrams tanks, HIMARS, javelins. I look at it in the context of the United States Congress, which is here in force. I'm told it is the largest delegation, bipartisan and bicameral, of the United States Congress to this meeting, to this Munich Security Conference. And how forward the United States Congress in a bipartisan way has been in terms of the track record of our support just over the last year, not to mention it's a technical term called an omnibus in our budgetary processes. But at the end of last year, dedicating another $45 billion for this upcoming year to support Ukraine. Our priority is to ensure Ukraine's strength on the battlefield. And that is our commitment. And it is a commitment not only to the people of Ukraine, but it is a commitment to our values and the principles we hold dear as a nation. And I cannot be here without also mentioning the importance of the alliance, Europe, and what it has done. Our host, Germany. I was with Chancellor Scholz yesterday. What we collectively have done, we are not only joined, I think, by our values and our understanding of the stakes and what is at stake in terms of a moral and a strategic interest. We have been great colleagues in terms of pooling our resources, coordinating our resources in a way that I believe will give Ukraine the best support they need to fight this fight.
Well, thank you very much for this. And for the outsiders, it is indeed the impression that this relationship, this transatlantic relationship, the relationship also between European, the German government and the US administration is as strong as ever. And thank you very much for this. If I may, nevertheless, there is something called IRA.
Yes, the Inflation Reduction Act.
And it has raised a lot of concern on this side of the Atlantic. But we have been reminded also by members of Congress about CBAM on our side. Yeah. How do we prevent transatlantic rifts on very important questions? Business, trade issues are very important. How confident are you that these differences can be overcome and don't disturb this wonderful but absolutely necessary close transatlantic relationship?
I'm very happy that you chose to raise this topic. So let me start with the spirit and the intent behind the Inflation Reduction Act. One very important area of focus for us has been to address and take our responsibility for what we must do in terms of the climate crisis, which of course is global in nature. And in fact, our friends in Europe have been asking for years that we would actually step up and do more. So under President Biden's leadership, we are proud that the United States has invested an historic amount in what we must do to take on our role of responsibility in the climate crisis. And by that, I mean we have, with the support of Congress, dedicated $370 billion to this effort. When I think of the impact on our friends and the interconnection and interdependence, if you will, between whatever we do in each of or any of our nations and the effect on the others, We think of this investment as having a global impact in predominantly two ways. One, the United States, I'd say this sadly, is one of the biggest emitters in the world. And we need to reduce our emissions, not only for the sake of the health and well-being of the people of our own country, but as we know, the people of the world are impacted. So this is an historic and very significant investment to actually turn the tide on that. And as you know, as many of our European friends and others around the globe have done, we have set strict standards for ourselves based on timelines. So there is that, which is the goal of reducing emissions. The other piece of it is we are very excited about thinking about the investment that we are making to spur innovation. We are entering a moment where we are creating a new economy, a clean energy economy. And if you think of us as being an investor, if you will, in creating incentives for the private sector, for scientists and academics to research, develop, and innovate around a clean energy economy, this investment that we are making will do that and have global impact. So that is how we think of it. But to your point, there are also issues that we need to address and do that in close consultation with our friends around the world. We have created a task force, the United States EU task force, closely coordinating and in consultation around working out some of the specific concerns. And those conversations are continuing. I met with President Macron yesterday and Chancellor Scholz, and I think we are seeing some progress there and the work will continue.
No, thank you for this reaffirmation, because we don't need these quarrels at that time. If time allows, one last question, if I may. This Munich Security Conference is, of course, dedicated to Ukraine, to the support of Ukraine, to confirm the transatlantic alliance, but we have widened the participation this year. We have invited a record number of representatives from the so-called Global South, because while we have this unity between us, when you talk to representatives of the Global South, and we had them on the podium this morning, you see that many countries sit on the fence. They see this as kind of a continuation of the conflict between US and Russia, or NATO and EU and European countries and Russia, and they feel the consequences. And they want to get it over with. They have an equidistant position there. And while we had, and you pointed to the 141 votes, but when you talk to important partners in the Global South, said they abstain. They say, get it over with. We don't want to take one side. And the point we're making, of course, is this is not East-West. This is about the rules-based in general, the rule of law that you mentioned, but we have to do some convincing because our track record is also not the best. So what can we do also together to win over those countries that continue to sit on the fence?
Well, we have to treat them as partners. And you and I talked about this briefly as we were walking in, and I thanked you, and I will thank you in front of the friends for bringing this issue to the stage and making it a part of the agenda for this conference. I agree it is an important subject. And I have met with many African leaders, leaders in the Caribbean, CARICOM in Southeast Asia. And what I believe is that they are right to want to make sure their voices are heard on every level on this topic, including the impact to their nations. You look at, for example, African nations and what Russia's aggression in Ukraine has meant in terms of food insecurity, energy insecurity. And these are nations, as we know, that are great importers of food and energy. So when the supply decreases, it has a significant impact on their nations. So I think it is important for us to recognize the impact that Russia's war has had on these nations. I think of it in the context of what we must do to also, on the previous discussion, consider the impact to the climate crisis, on those nations. We are some of the biggest emitters, and the impacts are clear. I meet with CARICOM nations, so island nations in the Caribbean, and they tell me about how they're seeing land erosion, how they are seeing through the extreme climate occurrences, a reduction in tourism and what that means in terms of a depletion of their GDP. And so these are issues that we must keep in mind when we have this discussion with them as partners around what the solutions look like, including standing in a unified way on these principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity. My friend, the president of Ghana, I believe, spoke yesterday, and I think he captured it well when, I'm going to paraphrase, but my understanding is he said that we need to dispense with this paradigm that is about us versus them and think differently about the relationship that we have. And for all of those reasons, I thank you for raising this, and I think it is worthy of the type of elevation and the discussion that you are giving it.
Thank you very much for this, and this will remain a theme here. We'll discuss this also next year, and maybe, Madam Vice President, can we already book a hotel room so you come back next year? Thank you for being here. Please, a hand of applause.
Ladies and gentlemen, the program will continue in a moment.
Yeah, that has been the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. We will talk about this in depth in just an instant, but now we travel from the United States across the ocean to the United Kingdom. Coming up next, Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom.